The first thing you feel as a 1930s OSLO Tram Depot Sweeper is the cold of the broom handle, smooth beneath your palms before the morning shift begins. There's no hurry here, only the low rhythm of work waiting to be done. Tonight, we'll keep beside you as the depot wakes, while steel wheels settle upon steel rails and the old building breathes around you. The air smells of damp wool, fine dust, machine oil, and the faint electrical warmth left behind by the last tram of the night. Outside, Oslo is still dark beneath a winter sky, though a thin grey light has begun to gather above the roofs. Snow lies along the edges of the street, pressed hard by boots and cartwheels, and your own shoes have carried a little of it through the depot doors. It melts into dark marks on the concrete floor. Somewhere beyond the wall, a tram bell sounds once, small and clear, before the silence folds around it again. You arrived by foot, as you usually do, with your coat buttoned high and your cap pulled low over your ears. The streets were quiet enough for you to hear the soft grind of snow beneath each step. A bakery chimney had already begun to smoke, and the warm smell of rye bread followed you for half a block. Now that fragrance is gone, replaced by coal soot, wet timber, and the familiar oily scent of the Oslo Tram Depot, where your working day will slowly unfold. The depot doors rise above you in tall wooden sections, each scarred by weather and years of handling. When they open, they roll with a deep wooden murmur, and the iron fittings answer with their own dry scrape. Tracks pass beneath them in parallel lines, shining faintly where wheels have polished the steel. Between those tracks, the floor holds yesterday's small remains, waiting patiently for your broom. Your work clothes are plain and made to last. The trousers are heavy, the shirt rough at the collar, and the woolen jacket carries the scents of many previous shifts. One pocket holds a folded handkerchief, while another contains a short pencil, worn almost to a stub. You won't need the pencil often, but a worker learns to keep useful things close, because walking back across the depot for one forgotten object takes more time than slipping it into a pocket at the start. The broom rests against a whitewashed brick wall, its stiff fibers spread from long use. Beside it stands a flat iron shovel, a galvanized bucket, and a wooden box for collecting anything that doesn't belong among the ordinary sweepings. Lost property has its own routine here. A glove, a purse, or a tram ticket marked with writing must be set aside, while cinders, sand, paper scraps, and dried mud go into the bucket. You begin by running your thumb across the broom handle, feeling for splinters in the dim light. The handle has been worn pale where your hands grip it, and darker where floor dust has settled into the grain. A loose fiber is pulled away, and the iron shovel receives a brief tap against the concrete. That sound travels beneath the roof beams, then returns softer, as though another sweeper far away has quietly answered you. Above the depot floor, shaded lamps cast round pools of yellow light. Their glow catches suspended dust, which moves slowly whenever a door opens or a tram rolls through. You can see the tiny grains rise, turn, and disappear into shadow. We'll spend many hours among those grains tonight, though there's no need to count them, because a broom teaches patience by asking for the same movement again and again. The Oslo tramway depends upon many quiet hands before a driver ever takes his controller and a conductor fastens the ticket pouch around a coat. Mechanics inspect wheels and motors, electricians attend to cables and contacts, and cleaners wipe the seats and windows. Your own part begins close to the ground. You keep the walking ways clear, empty the dirt from beneath the cars, and remove the grit that follows every passenger into the depot from the streets. It isn't celebrated work, and that suits the hour. The city will notice a tram running late, but few people will notice a depot floor that has been properly swept. Yet clean ground makes every other task easier. A mechanic can see a dropped nut. A foreman can cross between tracks without stepping through oily litter. And a cleaner can carry a pail without catching a heel upon a hidden piece of wood. Before sweeping, you walk the nearest road from end to end. A road is what the depot workers call one of the long tracks passing beneath the roof, and each has its own familiar marks. You know where rainwater gathers near the doors, where the concrete has cracked, and where a wheel flange once chipped the edge of an inspection pit. Your eyes make this first journey slowly, searching the floor, while your ears listen for movement. A standing tram is never treated as though it were merely furniture. Even when quiet, it belongs to a system of current, switches, brakes, and heavy wheels. You look for the small signs that tell you whether anyone is working aboard it. A mechanic's lamp may glow beneath the body, or a tool bag may rest beside a wheel. If there's any doubt, you ask, and the answer becomes part of the routine. At this early hour, voices remain low. The foreman speaks near the office door, turning the pages of a ledger, while a clerk warms his hands around a cup. Two mechanics exchange a few words beside the inspection pit, their boots making hollow sounds upon the boards laid across it. Nobody wastes breath in the cold. The depot has its own language of nods, lifted hands, and glances toward a track, and you've learned to understand it well. A clock hangs above the office window, its white face darkened slightly by smoke. You can hear the mechanism only when you stand close, though the minute hand governs the building more firmly than any raised voice. Trams must be placed, checked, and sent out in order. Your sweeping fits between those movements, filling the pauses and moving aside whenever steel wheels begin to turn. The first task is the strip of concrete beside the western wall, where grit has gathered beneath hooks used for coats and lanterns. You lower the broom and push it ahead in a broad, steady stroke. Dust rolls away from the fibers like a low grey wave. It carries threads, flakes of dried mud, match stems, and black specks of cinder, all whispering together across the floor with a sound not unlike dry leaves. You draw the broom back without lifting it far, because lifting scatters what you've just gathered. Another push follows, slightly overlapping the first, and then another, until a narrow ridge begins to form. Your shoulders warm before the rest of you does. The movement passes through your elbows and wrists, becoming easier as your muscles remember what morning requires, and soon the broom seems to find its own pace. There's a quiet skill in choosing the direction of a sweep. If you push toward the open doors, the draft may return half the dust to you. If you sweep across a rail too quickly, the fibers jump and leave dirt inside the groove. So you work lengthwise where you can, guiding the loose material into small heaps, then turning the broom at an angle to free what has settled beside the shining steel. The grooved rails require particular care. Street tram wheels run with flanges that sit within the groove, and dirt carried from the city collects along its narrow edges. You don't reach into that space while vehicles are moving, nor do you kneel where a driver might fail to see you. Instead, on a road that has been released for cleaning, you use a short scraper and draw the packed grit toward your shovel. Some of the grit is ordinary street sand, scattered outside to give boots and wheels a better hold on icy surfaces. Some is powdered stone from the road, mixed with soot until its original color can't be guessed. There are tiny curls of metal too, though they're seldom large enough to notice without looking closely. Under your scraper, all of it loosens with a dry rasp that you feel through the wooden grip. You work only a short section at a time. The loosened dirt is swept into a line, lifted with the flat shovel, and tipped into the galvanized bucket. Each load strikes the bottom with a muted clatter. As the bucket fills, its weight changes, and the handle presses more firmly into your fingers. Even without looking, you can judge how much it carries by the way it swings beside your knee. A scrap of blue paper appears beneath the edge of a bench. You catch it with the broom before the draft can take it, then turn it over with the tip of your shoe. It is part of an old timetable, softened by damp and printed with rows of times, no longer useful. For a moment, you imagine it passing from hand to hand across Oslo, folded inside a pocket, consulted under a street lamp, and finally forgotten here. Such scraps are common. Tram tickets are smaller and stiffer, often punched by the conductor's tool and creased where passengers have tucked them into gloves. Some fall beneath seats, while others cling to wet shoes and travel into the depot. You sweep them together without reading every mark. Their journeys are finished now, and in your bucket they lie beside sand from streets that those passengers crossed in the dark. A button comes next, black and round, with a short piece of thread still tied through its holes. That belongs in the wooden box rather than the bucket. It may have fallen from a conductor's uniform, or from the coat of someone who rode home late, tired and unaware. You brush away the dust, set it gently beside a single woolen mitten, and continue your measured passage along the wall. The mitten has been waiting since yesterday. It is child-sized, striped near the wrist, and still slightly damp from melted snow. Lost belongings are passed to the proper office, where they may be claimed if someone remembers where to ask. You don't know whether this one will find its way home, but you leave it where it can dry, its fingers resting softly against the wood like a sleeping hand. By now, another lamp has been lit above the central tracks, and the depot seems to widen around you. Rows of windows sit high in the walls, their lower panes filmed with smoke and winter grime. The first daylight enters through them reluctantly, turning the roof trusses from black shapes into timber beams. Drops of condensation cling to the glass, and one begins a slow journey downward, leaving a clear line behind it. The roof holds the night's chill. Cold air settles near the doors, while warmer pockets form around the trams and work lamps. As you move from one part of the floor to another, you feel those changes upon your face. Your breath shows briefly in the open aisle, then disappears near a car that has recently returned, where metal and upholstery still hold a trace of human warmth. A tram arriving from the street announces itself long before it crosses the threshold. First comes a muted hum beyond the doors, followed by the clean note of a bell. Then the rails begin to sing beneath the floor, a vibration traveling ahead of the wheels. You stop sweeping, lift the broom upright, and step to the marked side of the road while the depot staff guide the car inward. Its headlamp casts a pale shape across the concrete. Snow clings beneath the body and falls in soft clumps as the tram enters warmer air. The driver stands at the platform, one gloved hand steady upon the controller, while the conductor watches the clearance along the side. You remain still until the wheels cease turning and the proper signal tells everyone that the movement is finished. Only then do ordinary sounds return. A door folds or slides open. The conductor steps down and stamps moisture from both boots, while the driver exchanges a few words with the foreman. Their uniforms smell faintly of cold air, damp cloth, and tobacco carried from the passenger compartment. You can also detect the sharper scent of warm electrical equipment, unfamiliar to the street, but entirely at home inside the depot. The newly arrived tram brings a different kind of cleaning. Snow melt drips from the steps, carrying black street dirt onto the floor, while sand lies scattered inside the entrance. Passengers have left paper under the seats, and the wooden floor bears the cloudy marks of many wet soles. Another cleaner will deal with the seats and windows, but you take responsibility for the heavier dirt and the ground beneath the car. You wait until the driver has secured the tram and the foreman has assigned the road. Nothing is hurried. Procedures exist because every vehicle is heavier than any person, and because even a slow wheel must be respected. When you're told that the area is ready, you place a small wooden warning sign where it can be seen. Then bring the short broom, shovel, and bucket to the rear platform. The steps are damp beneath your boots. Their metal edges feel cold even through the soles, and you steady yourself with one hand against the door frame. Inside, the passenger compartment holds the stale warmth of the journey. Moist wool, old tobacco, leather, and tracked-in snow combine into a smell so familiar that it tells you where you are before your eyes have adjusted to the light. Electric lamps glow beneath simple shades along the ceiling. They illuminate varnished wood, metal fittings, advertisements, and rows of seats worn smooth by countless coats. Water beads along the lower edges of the windows, distorting the depot lamps outside. When you move down the aisle, your reflection follows dimly in the glass, carrying a broom through a second, quieter tram that seems to travel beside you. You begin at the far end so you won't walk across the cleaned floor. The broom is narrower here, with softer fibers that fit between seat supports and along the walls. You guide it beneath each bench, listening to the faint scratch of bristles over wooden boards. The tram rocks almost imperceptibly beneath your weight, though its wheels remain firmly planted upon the rails. Under the first seat, you find sand, 2 ticket corners, and a twist of paper that once held something sweet. A dried spruce needle has traveled in upon somebody's coat. It lies beside a strand of pale thread, both of them delicate against the dark floor. You draw them into the aisle and add them to the growing line, taking care not to send dust upward onto the seats. Every tram collects a small record of the city. There's grit from the market streets, soot from chimney-lined neighborhoods, sawdust from a workshop boot, and fine, pale dust carried from a building site. In summer, the mixture changes. Then you find dry leaves, flower petals, and light soil. But the Oslo winter makes everything darker, heavier, and touched with the faint mineral smell of snow. The seats themselves are not yours to scrub this morning, though you notice their condition as you pass. A cleaner with a cloth and pail follows behind, wiping the wooden edges and checking for sticky marks. You exchange a quiet nod. Working in the same narrow compartment teaches you to move without collision, each person reading the angle of a shoulder or the placement of a bucket before taking another step. Near the center, a folded newspaper has been pushed beneath a bench. It is yesterday's issue, creased into quarters and damp at one corner. You don't stop to read it, though a photograph and a row of dark headlines briefly face upward. News seems distant in the depot at this hour, because the immediate world consists of broom fibers, floorboards, and the soft knock of the cleaner's pail behind you. You place the newspaper apart from the wetter sweepings. Paper can sometimes be gathered separately, while anything too dirty or torn must be discarded. The distinction isn't perfect, and no one expects it to be. Your judgment grows from repetition. After enough mornings, your hands sort objects before your thoughts have fully named them, which is one of the quieter comforts of familiar work. At the forward platform, you pause beside the driver's controls. You don't touch them. The polished handle, brake gear, bell cord, and gauges belong to another worker's routine, as specific as your own. Yet you understand their places through observation, just as the driver knows why your bucket stands to one side and why a clean aisle must remain clear before the tram returns to service. The front windows look into the depot's broad interior. Through them, you see a mechanic crossing between pools of lamplight with a spanner in one hand. Steam rises from someone's cup near the office. Farther away, another tram waits in shadow, its windows black and its roof almost lost beneath the rafters, while the rails beneath it hold 2 thin bands of reflected gold. You turn back and sweep the aisle toward the rear door. The small ridge of dirt moves before the broom in patient stages. Nothing about the motion needs to be forceful. A light angle catches more dust than a hard push, and a slower stroke keeps the grit together. This is knowledge held in your wrists, gained through days that looked alike but were never completely the same. At the doorway, you lower the shovel and press one boot against its edge. The sweepings climb onto the iron blade with two careful strokes. You lift them into the bucket, and the sound is soft to hear because paper and damp sand cushion the fall. A last pass catches the fine dust, leaving the floorboards visible in long, clean strips between the dark iron seat supports. The cleaner behind you wipes the final ledge, then twists the cloth over a pail. Grey water falls with a warm, soapy smell that briefly overcomes the oil and damp wool. You both inspect the compartment without ceremony. A place missed beneath a seat is swept again. A window corner receives one more touch, and then the tools are gathered so the tram can be left ready. Stepping down, you feel the colder depot air return around your face. The bucket is heavier now, and the broom handle has warmed beneath your hands. You carry both to the refuse station near the side door, following a path that keeps you away from the active tracks. Your boots make a steady sound, half scrape and half thud, which blends with the distant work of hammers and brushes. The refuse station consists of sturdy bins with lids that fit well enough to discourage drafts and vermin. Ash and general floor dirt go where the foreman has directed, while metal pieces are kept apart if they might be useful or valuable. You tip the bucket slowly, controlling the dust. Damp sand slides first, then paper follows, and a final tap releases the grit clinging to the bottom. A grey cloud rises despite your care. It carries the dry smell of road dust and settles lightly upon the rim. You turn your head, wait for it to fall, and wipe the bucket with a rag kept nearby. The inside will never shine, but it needn't carry a thick layer from one task to the next. Clean tools make the work gentler, and they tell the next hand that someone has paid attention. There's a basin against the wall, fed by a cold tap that complains when turned. You rinse your fingers, and the water bites at first, making your knuckles ache. Dark lines run from the creases of your skin and disappear into the drain. A piece of coarse soap rests in a wooden dish, smelling faintly of pine, and you rub a little across your palms before drying them on the communal towel. The towel is stiff from use and never completely dry in winter. Still, it removes the worst of the water, and you flex your fingers until warmth returns. Your skin has already begun to roughen where the broom handle presses. Some workers wrap a sore place with cloth, but today your hands are sound, and the familiar calluses feel less like damage than a quiet record of time. A kettle warms upon a small stove in the break room, and its lid trembles with a delicate metallic chatter. You aren't stopping yet, though the smell of coffee has entered the corridor. It is dark, strong coffee, stretched carefully because wages and household money must be considered. Someone has opened a tin containing bread, and the scent of brown cheese rises sweetly into the warmer air. You know your pause will come after the next length of track. This knowledge makes the work ahead feel contained and manageable. There's no need to think about the entire depot at once. You attend to one road, one rail groove, and one patch of concrete, while the clock moves above the office and morning slowly gathers behind the high windows. And as the early Oslo light reaches farther beneath the roof, your next round begins along the central road, where yesterday's mud has dried in thin fans beside the rails. The broom meets it with a rougher sound. You lean gently into the handle, loosening each patch around its edge, and we move with you into the wider part of the depot, where the day's first departures are being prepared in a haze of dust and golden lamplight. The mud beside the central rails has been pressed flat by boots, then left to harden during the colder hours before dawn. Your broom passes over it without lifting much, so you set the bucket down and take up the broad scraper. Its blade slips beneath each thin crust with a dry, satisfying sound, and the fragments gather like broken clay beside your shoe. We stay close to the wall while you work, leaving the open aisle clear for the men preparing the morning cars. The scraper's handle is shorter than the broom's, which brings you nearer the cold floor and changes the rhythm in your shoulders. You press forward with both hands, loosen a patch, then stand and sweep it away before beginning another. There's a faint smell of stone whenever the iron blade crosses bare concrete, followed by the earthier scent of damp street dirt. Your breath remains slow, and the work advances by the width of your palm. Across the depot, a mechanic releases a brake and calls quietly to the driver waiting aboard the nearest tram. The car begins to move at walking speed, its wheels turning with a polished murmur that passes through the rails beneath your feet. You hold your broom upright and watch from a safe place, noticing how the lamplight slides along the windows. When the tram stops on the next road, the building settles again, and your sweeping resumes within the lingering hum. Movement inside a 1930s OSLO Tram Depot follows arrangements understood by everyone who works beneath its roof. A car cannot simply be pushed aside like a barrow, and even a brief repositioning draws several people into the same careful task. The driver watches the track, another worker observes the clearance, and the foreman keeps the larger order in mind. You contribute by leaving no bucket, broom or loose heap where a wheel or hurried boot might meet it unexpectedly. This attention soon becomes so natural that your tools seem to arrange themselves around the work. The bucket stays on the wall side, its handle folded down so it can't catch a coat. The broom rests flat when you need both hands, never balanced where a vibration could send it sliding. Your scraper returns to the same place beside the shovel, and your feet learn which strips of concrete remain outside the path of steel wheels and machinery. Near the center road, yesterday's sand has collected more thickly than elsewhere. Tramcars carry sand of their own for occasions when wet or icy rails offer too little grip, and some of it eventually finds the depot floor. Street grit arrives as well, worked into ridges by wheels and boots, until the colors become indistinguishable. You sweep the mixture into a low mound, hearing larger grains tick against the shovel, while finer dust passes through the broom with a whisper. A few pieces of gravel are too large for the broom fibers, so you pick them up with gloved fingers and place them directly into the bucket. The gloves are thin enough to let you feel their cold, angular surfaces, though thick enough to protect you from rough edges. One stone is pale beneath its coat of soot, perhaps carried from a road repair somewhere along the line. It has travelled through Oslo without a ticket, and its modest journey ends beneath your hand. Beside the rail, you notice a dark patch with a faint rainbow sheen beneath the overhead lamps. It is only a small spill of oil, but dry sweeping would spread it into a wider stain. You fetch a scoop of absorbent material kept for such work, scattering it lightly until the surface loses its shine. The granules settle into the oil, darken and thicken, and after a patient wait, you gather them with the shovel in several measured passes. Oil has its own way of announcing itself, even among coal smoke, damp timber, and the sharp smell of metal. It clings to the air and to the rag you use for the shovel's edge, leaving your fingertips aware of it through the cloth. You place the oily sweepings in the proper container, rather than mixing them with ordinary dirt. The depot's rules are practical ones, learned through long experience and repeated until good order feels as familiar as breathing. By the time the patch is clean, daylight has given the high windows a dull, pearly color. It doesn't brighten the whole depot, but it softens the boundary between the lamps and the shadows around them. Dust on the beams becomes visible, along with old cobwebs in corners no floor broom can reach. You glance upward only briefly, because your world remains close to the ground, measured in rails, paving, and the quiet reach of your broom. The central road leads toward an inspection pit, where mechanics can stand below the tram and examine parts hidden beneath its floor. The pit is empty now, and sturdy covers protect its opening until the next examination begins. You sweep around the edges without disturbing the boards, drawing grit away from the narrow joints. Cool air rises through the smallest gaps, carrying the mineral smell of brick, iron, and old water. When the covers are removed later, your work will change. The steps descending into the pit must be brushed, and the narrow floor below must be kept free of oily waste and dropped fragments. For now, you work above it, listening to your broom cross from concrete to timber with a softer note. Every surface answers differently, and after years in the Oslo depot, you could almost identify your place with closed eyes. A mechanic named Einar approaches with a small lamp hanging from one hand and a tool roll beneath his arm. He tells you the pit will be needed after the first departures, and you nod toward the section already cleaned. There's no need for a longer exchange. He steps across the boards, his boots leaving 2 damp marks that will dry on their own, while you continue toward the farther wall. Though you and Einar share the building, your routines meet only at certain moments. He knows the hidden arrangement of bearings, brake gear, cables, and bolts beneath each car, while you know where grit settles after a snowy evening. His tools speak in clicks and metallic taps, and yours answer with brushing and scraping. Together those sounds make the low working music of the depot, steady enough that silence would seem more noticeable than noise. The last stretch beside the wall contains a row of shallow depressions worn into the concrete. Fine dirt settles there, beyond the reach of a hurried sweep, so you turn the broom and work with its corner. Each hollow releases a grey curl. You gather the curls into one narrow line, then follow with a dampened brush that holds the remaining dust, rather than lifting it into the air around your face. Cold water waits in a pail near the wash area, its surface trembling whenever a tram moves along an adjoining road. You dip the brush only halfway and press it against the rim, because too much water would turn the dust into spreading mud. The damp fibers darken the concrete as they pass. Behind them lies a clean strip that smells faintly of wet stone and coarse soap, simple and fresh. Your knees complain softly when you straighten, though they'll loosen after another hour of movement. You rest one hand on the broom and roll each shoulder beneath the heavy jacket. The warmth you've made through work now sits between the wool and your skin, while the depot air remains cool upon your cheeks. This small contrast is comfortable, like standing near a stove without coming so close that the heat becomes sharp. Now the first group of morning trams is nearly ready to leave the Oslo depot. Conductors arrive from the staff rooms with ticket machines, coin changers, and leather bags arranged against their uniforms. Drivers inspect their platforms and speak briefly with the foreman, whose ledger lies open beneath the office lamp. You keep to the cleaned walkway and watch the familiar preparations gather around you, with no more commotion than a household setting out breakfast before dawn. A conductor pauses to retrieve a cloth from a cupboard, and the brass fittings of the ticket equipment catch the light near his coat. Small coins shift inside the changer with a muted rattle. Soon those coins will pass through many gloved hands across the city, while tickets will be punched and folded, and sometimes dropped beneath the seats you've just swept. The coming day is already contained in these quiet sounds of leather, paper, and metal. The departure of each tram follows a slow sequence. Doors are checked. The line ahead is made clear, and a signal passes from worker to worker before the wheels begin turning. You stand beside your bucket as the first car moves toward the great doors, its interior lamps glowing warmly against the grey morning. The bell sounds once outside, and then the tram slides into Oslo, carrying its clean floor toward waiting passengers and the pale streets. Cold air enters behind it. The draft moves along the rails, fluttering a ticket scrap you missed beneath the edge of a cupboard. You catch it with your boot before it travels farther, then bend and place it in the bucket. Snowflakes drift through the open doorway and vanish on the darker concrete, leaving points of moisture no larger than pinheads. For a few moments, the depot smells of open air, chimney smoke, and distant bread. Another tram follows, then another, each departure uncovering a section of floor that was hidden through the night. Beneath the standing cars, you find dark bands of dirt aligned with the wheels, along with scattered sand and dried drops of slush. These newly opened spaces become your next territory. As the morning service spreads through the city, you move into the emptier roads and begin the deeper cleaning that can't be done while the cars are resting. The light through the high windows shifts, and so does your task, carrying us from the first departures into the long middle hours of the 1930s OSLO Tram Depot. Where rows of cars stood before, there are now broad lanes of concrete and steel. Their emptiness makes the building feel larger, and every broom stroke travels farther beneath the roof. You start at the door end, working inward, so fresh dirt from the street won't be drawn across what you've already made clean. The rails nearest the entrance are wet from melting snow. Water gathers inside the grooves and reflects the doors in broken lines, while black grit settles at the bottom. You use a narrow tool shaped for the groove, drawing it toward you without forcing the blade. The first pull brings a ribbon of mud, and the second brings sand, horsehair, and several softened pieces of paper pressed together into an unrecognizable pulp. Street life arrives in the depot by more routes than anyone could easily count. A tram passing a horse-drawn cart collects fine splashes from the road, while passengers bring sawdust from shops and flour from market floors upon their boots. Smoke settles on roofs and windows, then comes down with condensed moisture during cleaning. Your bucket receives all these traces without distinction, becoming heavier with a quiet mixture of Oslo's ordinary working day. At the threshold, the rail groove contains a ridge of ice, no thicker than your little finger. It has formed where meltwater met the colder air beneath the doors. You don't strike it hard, because a wild blow could damage the tool or send fragments toward someone nearby. Instead, you loosen its edges with several gentle taps, then lift it in cloudy pieces that melt against your glove and leave the fabric damp. A small drain sits between the roads, protected by an iron grating worn smooth at the corners. Winter dirt quickly blocks its openings, so you sweep across it from several directions and lift the grate with the proper hook. Beneath it lies a shallow basket that catches larger debris before water enters the pipe. You empty the basket into the bucket, rinse it with a careful pour, and replace it until the iron sits level beneath your boot. The drain gives off a cool, earthy smell. Not unpleasant, but different from the warmer scents beneath the roof. Water gurgles once when the passage clears, and the shallow puddle near the door begins to shrink. You guide the remaining moisture with a rubber-edged floor tool, pushing it in broad curves toward the grating. Each pass leaves a dull sheen behind, and the lamps shimmer there until the concrete slowly dries to its usual gray. Your hands have found their morning rhythm completely now. One reaches for the broom before the other has released the scraper, while your feet place the bucket where it will be needed next. Familiar work leaves room for quiet thoughts, though they come without demanding attention. You may remember the warm kitchen at home, a loose hinge that needs tightening, or the price of potatoes. and then the scrape of grit returns you gently to the floor. There is comfort in a task whose edges can be seen. A dirty length of rail begins before you and ends at the next set of points, and every careful stroke shortens it. The whole depot may never remain spotless for long, because trams and workers continually bring the city indoors. Yet this doesn't diminish your work. Cleanliness here is a rhythm rather than a finished state, renewed each day like the fire in a stove. Near the points where one track divides toward another road, the metalwork becomes more complicated. Narrow spaces collect compacted dirt, and moving parts must remain unobstructed, though their adjustment belongs to trained track workers. You clean only what your instructions allow, using the small brush while the road is secured. The bristles reach into corners the broad broom passes over, releasing grains that click brightly across the steel before coming to rest against your shovel. You know the shape of these points by sight and by the feel transmitted through the brush. Smooth resistance means ordinary grime, while a hard catch tells you to stop and look rather than press blindly. Sometimes the obstruction is a stone, sometimes a folded ticket, and sometimes merely a patch of frozen mud. Today it is a short length of twine, dark with oil and wound loosely around a projecting edge, like a forgotten thread. You cut the twine with a small knife from the tool shelf, then pull it free in one piece. It smells of damp hemp and machinery, and leaves a black mark across your glove. The string goes into the refuse bucket, while the knife is wiped and returned. Nothing remarkable has happened, yet the points are clear again, and some future wheel will pass above them without ever knowing what your hands removed this morning. A whistle from the foreman's side of the depot tells you the first break has begun. It isn't a sharp factory blast, only a brief signal that reaches the far roads through the roof's soft echoes. You finish the small area beneath your broom before stopping, because leaving half a heap invites a draft to scatter it. Then you empty the bucket, rinse the shovel, and line your tools against the wall in their familiar order. The break room is warmer than the main shed, though the windows around its frame still carry beads of condensation. A black stove stands near one wall, giving off the dry smell of heated iron and coal. Coats hang from wooden pegs, their shoulders steaming faintly as snowmelt evaporates. You choose your usual place at the end of the table, where the bench is polished by years of workers shifting nearer to the heat. Your food is wrapped in paper inside a small tin. There are slices of dark bread, spread sparingly with butter, a piece of brown cheese, and half an apple saved from home. The bread is firm at the edges, but soft within, and its grainy sweetness grows as you chew slowly. Around you, cups touch saucers, a knife scrapes across a crust, and the stove settles with a low iron tick. Coffee is poured from an enamel pot whose rim has lost a little of its white coating. The drink is dark and hot, with a bitterness softened by the smell rising into your face. You hold the cup between both hands before taking a sip, letting warmth enter your fingers. After cold water, steel tools, and the winter broom handle, the simple heat feels generous enough to quiet every small ache for a while. Conversation moves gently around the table. Someone mentions a stubborn door on a car sent out earlier, and another worker speaks of snow expected by evening. The remarks don't become a lively debate, because most of you are still carrying the hush of early work. There are pauses long enough to hear coals shifting in the stove, and nobody hurries to fill them with unnecessary words. You unwrap the half apple last. Its cut surface has browned, though the flesh remains crisp and cool. The first bite releases a clean, sharp scent that briefly brightens the room, and a drop of juice gathers near your thumb. You wipe it with the paper and continue eating, listening while Einar describes a worn fitting in the plain tone of someone who trusts that patient hands will set it right. The men and women of the depot know one another through repeated fragments rather than grand confessions. You learn who brings herring on Fridays, who folds wrapping paper for later use, and who always leaves the warmest place for an older worker. Others know that you prefer the end of the bench and take coffee without much milk. These little habits form a kind of companionship, quiet enough to sit comfortably beside the day's labor. On a shelf above the table, a newspaper rests beside a jar of sugar. Its pages may be read by several people before evening, each smoothing the folds left by the previous pair of hands. You glance at a small notice about road work, then let the paper remain where it is. The depot's own signs are more immediate. The clock, the foreman's ledger, the cooling cup, and the broom waiting beyond the door. When the break ends, nobody announces it with urgency. Cups are rinsed, crumbs gathered into folded paper, and lunch tins closed with small metallic snaps. You pull on your gloves while crossing the corridor, feeling the colder air return through the wool of your jacket. The broom stands exactly where you left it, and its familiar handle settles into your palm as naturally as though the pause were only a single long breath. By mid-morning, the work has moved below the tram roads, into the inspection pit that Einar mentioned before the departures. The covers have been drawn aside, revealing brick walls, narrow steps, and a line of lamps protected behind thick glass. No car stands above it yet. You wait for permission, then descend carefully, carrying a short broom and a smaller pail, suited to the confined space beneath the tracks. The temperature drops with each step. Coolness rises through the soles of your boots, and the air smells more strongly of old oil, damp mortar, iron filings, and dust. At the bottom, the depot roof seems unexpectedly far away, framed by rails and the timber edges above. Voices from floor level reach you softened and incomplete, while your own movements return from the brick walls in close, hollow echoes. Cleaning the pit requires a different posture and a different patience. The passage is narrow, so you sweep in short arcs, bringing dirt from the walls toward the center before working it into the pail. You keep one hand aware of the brick beside you and watch the steps remain clear. If anyone approaches above, you hear the change in footsteps long before a face appears over the edge, and you pause until the way is understood. The floor holds black flakes rubbed from machinery, small clumps of grease, and fine rust-colored dust near the rail supports. A nut lies beneath the ledge, too clean and regular to be discarded without asking. You pick it up, wipe it upon a rag, and set it in a shallow tray used for found metal parts. What seems worthless to a broom may matter to a mechanic, and experience has taught you to keep useful things separate. Along one wall, a narrow gutter carries away wash water. Its slope is slight, but sufficient, provided dirt hasn't settled across the channel. You guide the short brush along it, loosening a dark paste that moves reluctantly toward the drain. The smell becomes sharper where old lubricant has mixed with water. You breathe through your nose, calmly and lightly, while fresh air from above stirs the edge of your cap. A protected lamp glows near your shoulder, warming a small circle of brick without warming the air itself. Dust has settled upon the glass, dimming it to amber. You wipe the cover with a dry rag, and the light grows clearer, revealing pale mortar lines and scratches made by tools over many years. Some marks are older than your employment, perhaps older than several trams now serving the city beyond these walls. The pit allows you to see the depot from the underside. Boots pass above at eye level, and the polished inner faces of the rails form two dark lines against the lamps. You hear a bucket being set down, a door closing, and a distant telephone ringing in the office. Each sound arrives, stripped of its source, leaving only a gentle vibration that tells you the working building continues around your hidden place. You sweep the lowest step, then the one above it, carrying dirt downward rather than scattering it onto cleaned stone. The corners need the small hand brush, whose wooden back fits neatly against your palm. A bent washer appears in one corner, followed by a pencil shaving and a fragment of red cloth. You sort them by touch, adding the metal to the tray and everything else to the pail. When the floor is clear, you sprinkle a little absorbent material over 2 greasy marks and work it gently with the brush. The pale grains darken as they take up the residue. You gather them, repeat the process, and wipe the last film with a rag reserved for oily surfaces. The brick beneath will never look new, but it no longer shines, and your boot finds steady purchase where it previously might have slipped. Einar looks down from the edge and asks whether you're nearly finished. You tell him that only the far step remains, and he waits rather than descending around you. This courtesy is ordinary in the Oslo Tram Depot, where narrow spaces ask workers to recognize one another's pace. You brush the final corner, lift your pail, and climb into the brighter air, leaving the pit ready for the mechanic's own patient routine. A tram will soon be positioned above the opening. Before that happens, you count your tools by sight and confirm that no rag or brush remains below. The nut and washer are handed to Einar, who turns them beneath the light and places them beside his tool roll. He may know their origin later, or they may simply join a box of spare pieces. Your responsibility ends with bringing them safely into his hands. The car enters at walking speed and stops over the pit, guided by signals too familiar to require raised voices. From the side, you watch its dark underframe pass above the opening, followed by wheels whose steel surfaces show fine lines from service. Once everything is secured, Einar descends with his lamp. You return to the open floor, where the broader Broom feels almost weightless after the tight movements below ground. A bell rings from somewhere outside, followed by the muted rush of a tram passing along the street beyond the wall. The sound reminds you that Oslo is fully awake now. Shops are opening, office doors are turning, and school children are stamping snow from their boots before entering warm corridors. Much of that movement depends upon cars prepared in this depot, though your own world remains enclosed by brick, timber, and rails. The next road holds no heavy dirt, only a wide veil of fine dust beneath the lamps. This calls for a softer sweep. You dampen the broom very lightly, then move from wall to center with long overlapping strokes. The dust clings to the fibers instead of rising, leaving dark, even paths behind you. Your steps match each push, and the repeated movement settles the body into an easy, almost walking calm. There are patches where the concrete bears old painted markings, faded by wheels and cleaning. You follow their lines without trying to make them new. Some indicate safe paths, while others belong to arrangements changed before you began working here. The floor keeps such memories quietly. A building used every day acquires layers of purpose, and even a sweeper may not know why every buried line was first placed beneath the paint. Beside a support post, you find a small nest of dust built around 3 wooden matches. None has burned. Their red tips are dulled by grit, and one is broken near the center. Because open flame is treated carefully among oils, timber, and electrical equipment, you collect them at once rather than leaving them beneath the cupboard. They make almost no sound when dropped into the bucket. Light things inside a heavy working room. The support post is iron, painted dark green beneath years of scratches. At shoulder height, the surface has been rubbed smooth by coats and hands passing close. Near the base, dirt hides against the raised flange, so you circle it with the broom's edge. A spider retreats into a crack before the fibers arrive. You give it time to disappear, then finish the circle and draw the loosened dust toward the central heap. Your work isn't a battle against the building's small life. Mice are unwelcome near food and stored cloth, but a spider high among the beams concerns no one. Pigeons sometimes shelter near an open door. leaving feathers that drift beneath benches. Today, only this single spider shares your corner, and it remains hidden while you lift the heap and leave the post standing clean within its ring of worn concrete. The broom fibers slowly load with damp grey dirt, making them heavier and less willing to spread. You carry the broom to the cleaning rack and comb the head with a blunt iron tool. Threads, hair, and paper cling between the fibers, coming free in small mats. You don't pull too roughly, because a well-kept broom lasts longer, and replacing useful equipment is never treated as a casual matter in the depot. After combing, you rinse only the lower fibers, keeping the wooden block from soaking unnecessarily. Water runs black at first, then fades to cloudy grey. You shake the broom once over the drain, and stand it bristles downward at a slight angle, where air can pass around it. Another dry broom takes its place in your hands, its fibers stiffer and fuller, with the faint grassy smell of stored brushwood. Each tool has a character acquired through use. One broom bends more easily along a wall, while another holds a straight line across open concrete. The short brush fits the left hand better because its back is worn unevenly near the thumb. You choose without much thought, guided by small preferences no inventory ledger could describe. In this way, ordinary equipment becomes personal without ever truly belonging to you. The depot carpenter sometimes replaces split handles or secures a loose broom head with a wedge. His corner smells of shavings, glue, and resin, a warmer scent than the metalworking area nearby. As you pass, he is smoothing a strip of ashwood with a plane. The blade releases a pale curling ribbon, and for a moment the clean fragrance of fresh timber follows you across the dusty aisle. You stop only long enough to place a cracked shovel handle beside his bench, with a note tied around the grip. The crack is small, but it opens whenever pressure falls upon the blade. A repair now may preserve the handle for years, while neglect would let one split become two. The carpenter runs a thumb across the wood, nods, and returns to his plane as the shaving grows from beneath it in one unbroken curl. Farther along, the metal shop carries different sounds and smells. A file moves across an edge with a dry hiss, and a vise turns with a heavy, measured creak. The air holds iron dust, cutting oil, and the faint remains of heated metal from earlier work. You sweep the walkway outside without entering the marked workspace, gathering filings that have traveled beneath shoes and sparkle briefly among the darker grit. Metal filings demand care because their edges can pierce cloth or skin. You use the designated brush and pan, keeping your gloves on while you work. The finest particles form a dark, heavy powder that moves differently from ordinary dust, resisting the broom and settling quickly. Larger curls lie in loose spirals, blue-gray and bright at their edges, and these go into a container reserved for scrap metal. The container answers each piece with a clear ring. Its contents may be returned for reuse or sold as scrap, depending upon quality and depot practice. Nothing useful is discarded thoughtlessly. Timber offcuts warm stoves, cloth becomes cleaning rag, and metal is sorted from ash and street dirt. Your sweeping sits quietly within this economy of care, separating the day's remains so another purpose may still be found. Near noon, the depot grows quieter again. Most service cars are outside, and the large shed holds only those awaiting inspection, repair, or a later shift. The silence is never complete, but individual sounds become easier to distinguish. A clock ticks above the office, water drips near the wash rack, and Einar's spanner touches metal below a tram with a muted, deliberate knock. You cross the open roads carrying an empty pail, and your footsteps return from the roof in slow succession. Without the morning rows of trams, the tracks appear to run farther than they truly do. Light from the windows lies across them in pale bars. Dust turns inside those bars whenever you pass, then settles behind you so gently that the air seems to close over your movement like still water. This quieter hour is used for washing sections of floor that can remain undisturbed long enough to dry. You begin near the side wall, where a tap fills 2 buckets with cold water. A measured amount of coarse soap is stirred into one of them, producing little foam but a clean, alkaline smell. The water clouds around the wooden stirring stick, and your glove squeaks faintly when you lift the wet handle from the pail. A stiff floor brush replaces the broom. Its low wooden block has a socket for the handle, and its pale bristles darken as soon as they touch the water. You spread a modest pool across the concrete, never enough to run toward the electrical work or inspection pit. Then you scrub in broad half circles, overlapping the edges until old grime loosens and the water turns the color of weak ink. The sound is fuller than dry sweeping. Bristles grind against the textured floor, water laps around the block, and your boots make soft rubbery marks where the surface is wet. Soap lifts the smell of accumulated dirt, mixing damp stone with traces of oil and winter mud. You open the nearby vent a little wider, and cold air brushes your forehead while the grey washwater gathers ahead of the squeegee. The squeegee has a straight rubber blade fixed beneath a wooden frame. You pull it toward you in long strokes, shaping the water into a moving band that shines beneath the lamps. Small islands of foam collect along the edge, each trembling before joining the larger flow. At the drain, you slow the movement so grit can settle in the basket rather than passing directly into the pipe with the water. One bucket cleans only a limited area before the water becomes too dirty to use. You judge the moment by color and smell, then carry it to the proper drain with both hands around the handle. The weight pulls against your shoulders, and the metal rim feels cool near your knuckles. You pour steadily, rinse the pail, and watch the last dark swirl disappear, leaving a thin line of foam upon the iron. Fresh water brings a cleaner scent, and the second washing moves more easily over the loosened floor. Your brush no longer catches upon dried mud. It travels in broad arcs, revealing patches of aggregate within the concrete and old scars shaped like crescents. Some were made by dropped tools, others by equipment dragged years ago, and all remain after the dirt above them has been patiently removed. The washed section must be marked until dry. You place 2 wooden barriers at its edges, plain enough to be noticed without making the depot feel closed. Workers alter their paths automatically, stepping around the wet sheen. Nobody complains about the small diversion, because everyone understands what a clean floor provides. Your task becomes visible for a little while, reflected in the water before it fades back into ordinary usefulness. From the office comes the smell of soup being warmed for the midday meal. It carries onion, barley, and perhaps a little salt meat, though distance softens every part. Your stomach notices before the clock does. Still, one narrow strip remains beside the wall, and you wash it before stopping. The brush travels slowly there, fitting beneath the radiator pipes and around a cupboard leg where black dust gathers in a stubborn crescent. A woolen sock has somehow found its way behind the cupboard. It is adult-sized, patched at the heel, and dry enough to suggest it has waited there for several days. You lift it with the end of the brush, then pick it up and carry it to the lost property box. The child's mitten is gone now, taken to the office, and the lonely sock occupies its former place upon the bare wood. You add a small paper note stating where it was found, using the pencil from your pocket. The point is blunt, so the letters appear broad and soft upon the scrap. Your handwriting needn't be elegant, only clear enough for the clerk. When the note is folded around the sock, the pencil returns to its pocket with one more fraction of its length spent upon the depot's quiet business. The midday pause arrives as the cleaned floor loses its last bright sheen. You test one corner with the sole of your boot, finding it damp but no longer slippery. The barriers remain while you carry the brush to the rack and rinse its bristles. Soap runs from them in pale threads, and you work your fingers through the outer row to free a strand of twine caught near the wooden block. In the break room, the earlier warmth has deepened. More coats hang along the wall, and the stove's iron sides give off a low, steady heat. Bowls are arranged upon the table for those who have brought soup, while others unwrap bread, cold potatoes, or fish. You sit again at the bench end, placing your tin before you as steam from several cups gathers briefly beneath the shaded lamp. Your midday food is simple and filling. A boiled potato has been cut in half and sprinkled with salt, and 2 bread slices hold a thin layer of cheese. There's a small piece of herring wrapped separately, so its briny smell won't enter everything else. You eat without haste, feeling the warmth of the room reach your knees while cold slowly leaves the leather of your boots. Someone passes the coffee pot, and you accept half a cup. Too much would feel wasteful, and the remaining shift asks for steady hands rather than wakeful excitement. The coffee tastes slightly smoky from standing near the stove. You soften it with a little milk, watching a pale cloud turn through the dark liquid before the colors meet and settle into a quiet brown. At the opposite end of the table, a driver describes the snow along an exposed stretch of line. His account remains practical, concerned with rails, stopping distances, and the places where drifting begins. You listen because his street belongs to your floor later. The sand, slush, and soot beneath his tram will return to the depot, and by evening you'll recognize the weather in whatever the broom gathers from beneath its steps. A cleaner speaks about a passenger who left a parcel on a seat, carefully tied with string and labeled for an address across town. The parcel was handed to the conductor, then passed to the lost property office, according to routine. Nobody speculates about what it contained. In a depot, privacy often rests upon simple restraint, the understanding that not every closed package or folded note needs to be opened by curious hands. You finish with the bread crust, using it to gather the last trace of herring from the paper. The salt remains pleasantly upon your tongue, and the hot coffee clears the heavier taste. Around the room, spoons rest in bowls and tins close, one by one. The meal has not interrupted the day so much as folded itself into it. Another familiar task performed with hands that know the order without being told. When you rise, the bench gives a small creak of relief. You shake 2 crumbs from the paper into your palm and place them in the stove rather than brushing them onto the floor. The gesture is almost unconscious. A sweeper notices what falls, even during rest, and you leave the table as you hope to find it, with the cups gathered and the wood free of grease or crumbs. The afternoon work begins near the storage rooms of the 1930s OSLO Tram Depot, where shelves hold brushes, cloths, soap, lamp supplies, and carefully counted spare items. Your task is to clear the passage and check the lower shelves for damp. Snowmelt sometimes travels beneath the door, and a leaking container can spoil paper or corrode metal before anyone notices the change. You carry a hand lamp, though grey daylight now reaches much of the narrow corridor. The storage room door opens inward with a dry rub against the floor. Inside, the air is still and cool, smelling of canvas, wood, soap, and the faint tarry scent of treated rope. Boxes stand upon raised slats to keep them above moisture. Labels are written by hand, some newly dark and others faded to brown, and you move between them carefully, leaving every item in the order set by the storekeeper. A damp patch appears beneath the outer wall, no larger than a dinner plate. You touch it with 2 fingers and find cold water rather than oil. The snow outside is melting against the masonry, and a little moisture has crept through near the base. You place a shallow tray beneath the drip, dry the floor with a rag, and report the patch so it can be watched during the warmer part of the day. The rag leaves the concrete darker, but not wet. You hang it near the wash area, where it can dry before being used again. Cloth passes through many lives in the depot. A worn shirt may become a polishing rag, then an oily rag for rough work, and finally fuel or waste when no clean corner remains. Even soft cotton follows a routine, descending gradually from one careful purpose to the next. Beneath the lowest shelf, dust has gathered around a row of boot prints. You kneel with the hand brush, drawing it toward the aisle in small, gentle strokes. The dust smells dry and woody here, untouched by street mud. A few grains of spilled soap make it pale, and a loose brass tack glints near the skirting board until you place it in your pocket for the storekeeper's tin. The shelves hold replacement broom heads bound tightly with fiber. Their unused bristles are even and golden, unlike the grey, spreading tools on the rack outside. You resist the urge to run a hand across them, because new supplies stay clean until issued. Still, their grassy scent reaches you whenever the air shifts. It recalls dry summer fields, a distant thought within a room, surrounded by winter coats and frozen streets. A bundle of wooden handles leans in one corner, each straight, pale, and longer than your arm. They'll be fitted as old handles split or wear too smooth around the socket. You inspect the floor behind them, then lift the bundle just enough for the brush to pass beneath. The handles knock softly together, producing a hollow sound like branches touching in a quiet wind. When the storeroom floor is clear, you return each box exactly to its former position. The raised slats remain visible, and nothing blocks the air near the damp wall. You tell the storekeeper about the tray and hand him the brass tack. He places it in a small drawer without comment, then marks the damp patch in his notebook while you carry the collected dust toward the bin. Outside the storage corridor, daylight has strengthened enough for several lamps to be switched off. Their sudden absence doesn't darken the depot as much as you expect. The windows now cast a cool, broad light that reveals colors the lamps softened. Green paint upon posts, reddish brick, pale timber, and the blue-gray sheen of rails. Your jacket appears browner than it did at dawn, with fine dust resting across one sleeve. You brush the sleeve near the open door, turning your face from the little cloud. A colder draft enters and carries the dust outside. Beyond the threshold, the yard lies under packed snow marked by rails and footprints. A worker pushes a barrow along a cleared path, its wheel giving a rhythmic crunch, while smoke from surrounding chimneys moves almost horizontally through the still Oslo air. For a moment you stand where indoors and outdoors meet. One cheek feels the depot's mild warmth, while the other receives the clean bite of winter. The contrast sharpens the smell of snow, which is less a scent than an absence of dust and oil. Then the door is drawn nearer to its frame, leaving only the opening required for work, and you return to the softer air beneath the roof. A later service tram waits near the eastern wall, ready for cleaning before it joins the afternoon traffic. This car has spent the morning out of service, so its dirt is yesterday's, dried and settled. You board with the narrow Broom and find the compartment colder than those that returned at dawn. The wooden seats hold no warmth, and the windows are clouded only at their edges where frost has formed delicate white fans. You begin beneath the rear bench, drawing out a layer of dust untouched by wet boots. It contains ticket punches, hairpins, a stub of pencil, and a small paper bag folded flat by many footsteps. The hairpins go into the found object tray, though their owner is unlikely to seek them. The pencil is too short for comfortable writing, yet you save it beside your own, knowing a stub can still mark a label or tally a bucket. An advertisement above the windows shows a neat drawing of a household product, its lettering bright despite the dim compartment. You've seen it many times, but only while working do you notice the tiny details. A patterned curtain, a smiling face, and a table drawn straighter than any table in ordinary life. You return your eyes to the floor, where real household dust has arrived beneath real shoes from homes across the city. The tram's varnished panels hold a faint scent of wood beneath the stronger smells of tobacco and cold fabric. When your shoulder passes close, the surface reflects a softened outline of your jacket. Screws sit evenly along the metal trim, and leather straps hang above the aisle for standing passengers. You brush beneath each support, listening as grit moves from shadow into the open with a dry, papery sound. A coin lies near the front platform, darkened enough to resemble a washer. You recognize its edge when the broom turns it into the light. Money must be handed in, however small the value, so you lift it and place it apart in a lidded tin. The clerk will record where it was found, and perhaps a passenger will claim it, though most likely it will wait quietly among other forgotten coins. Beside the coin is a polished chestnut, carried for luck or simply kept because it felt pleasant in someone's pocket. Its smooth brown surface has escaped the dirt around it. You roll it once beneath your thumb, feeling the pale flattened side, then add it to the found object tray rather than the sweepings. There's no rule for chestnuts, but it seems too carefully kept to be treated as ordinary refuse. Your decisions are rarely discussed, yet they give the work a human shape. A worthless wrapper can be discarded at once, while a child's marble, a key, or a mended glove deserves a pause. You imagine the hand that may search for it later, and this is enough to guide you. The depot receives thousands of passing objects, but your attention allows a few of them to wait for their owners in a safer place. The forward platform needs a stiffer brush. Sand has lodged in the corners beside the door, and dried slush forms a grey rim along the metal threshold. You wet the edge with a cloth, wait while the moisture softens it, then scrape gently with a wooden tool that won't scar the surface. The dirt releases in curling strips, exposing the worn tread beneath, and the shallow grooves made to steady a passenger's boot. A brass rail runs beside the steps, dulled by gloves and winter air. Polishing belongs to another part of the cleaning routine, but you wipe away the loose grime where your hand has rested. The cloth comes away black at one edge. Beneath the dirt, the brass gives a low, warm gleam, not bright enough to draw attention, only clean enough to meet the next worker's touch. Once the interior is swept, you step down and inspect the floor beneath the platform. A scatter of rust flakes lies near a bracket, mixed with soot and sand. You leave the bracket itself for the mechanic, but sweep the loose debris and mention the flakes to the foreman. He makes a note, then bends to look without alarm, his fingers tracing the air near the metal, but not touching it until the car is properly secured. Routine maintenance depends upon these modest observations. You aren't asked to diagnose the source, only to notice what differs from yesterday: a fresh stain, an unusual pile of filings, or a loose piece beneath a tram may tell trained hands where to look. Because you spend hours near the floor, you see details others pass above, and the broom becomes, in its quiet way, an instrument of attention. The foreman thanks you with a nod and sends for Einar. You move to the next section without waiting for their discussion, trusting each person to carry the matter forward. Behind you, a lamp is placed near the bracket, and two low voices consider what they see. Ahead, the open aisle holds another pale layer of dust, simple and familiar, ready for the broad sweep of your tool. And as the afternoon trams begin returning one by one from the snowy streets of Oslo, the depot's empty roads slowly fill again with warm windows, dripping steps, and the soft electrical scent of cars coming in from service. You make room for them, gathering your pails toward the wall and watching each set of wheels settle into place. Then, when the signals are finished and the rails grow still, you approach the first dark trail of melting snow with your broom angled low, ready to follow the long wet line farther into the evening. The first returning tram brings a shallow river with it, though the water moves no faster than a slow spill beneath the rear step. Snow packed around the underframe has softened in the depot's warmer air, releasing drops darkened by soot and fine road grit. You place a low tray beneath the steadiest drip, then guide the spreading water toward the drain with the rubber blade. A cool, mineral smell rises from the slush as it thins across the concrete. You don't begin beneath the car until its position has been confirmed and the workers responsible for it have finished their first checks. The conductor steps down with the ticket bag pressed against one hip, and the driver leaves the forward platform carrying a folded cloth. Their boots add fresh half-moons of moisture beside the rail. You wait near the wall with your broom upright, listening as the foreman records the car's return in the ledger. When the road is released for cleaning, you start beside the doors rather than beneath the middle of the car. Most passenger dirt gathers near the steps, where boots have stamped away snow before moving toward a seat. Damp sand lies thick in the corners, mixed with softened ticket pieces and a few strands of straw. You draw it outward with the narrow brush, making a dark ridge that holds together beneath the pressure of your bristles. The tram's interior remains pleasantly warm. Its lamps shine against misted windows, while droplets run down the glass and collect along the wooden frames. You remove your outer gloves so the broom won't slip, and the warmer handle feels smooth against your chilled fingers. Around you, the car carries the fading presence of its passengers through the smells of wool, tobacco, leather, soap, and cold air trapped inside heavy coats. A newspaper has been left open upon a seat, its wide pages disturbed whenever the depot doors admit a draft. You fold it along the existing crease and place it with the paper salvage, taking care not to tear the damp edge. Beneath the opposite bench, your broom discovers a crust of bread and a little paper packet containing salt. The bread is too dirty to save, but the packet remains closed and goes into the lost property tray. Farther down the aisle, one floorboard gives a familiar soft creak beneath your weight. You've heard it for weeks, and the maintenance staff already know its voice, though you still listen each time you cross it. A known creak is part of the car's character, while a new sound deserves notice. The distinction comes from repetition, from hearing the same boards and fittings through many quiet rounds of sweeping. You work beneath the seats with a careful sideways stroke. The supports divide the floor into narrow spaces, and each space requires its own angle of the broom. One catches sand near the wall, another hides a tram ticket folded into a triangle, and the next holds nothing but fine grey dust. Your body learns the sequence, bending and straightening, as gently as a branch moving under the weight of snow. The folded ticket feels firm enough to unfold, though there's no reason to read where it was issued. You flatten it once, see the conductor's punch marks, and add it to the paper. Each punched hole once confirmed a small journey through Oslo, perhaps from a market street to a residential hill, or from a cold office to a warmer home. Now its purpose has ended, leaving only a square of faded card beneath your hand. At the rear platform, melted snow has gathered inside the grooves of the step. You absorb it with an old cloth before sweeping, pressing the folded fabric down until its dry patches become dark. The metal beneath feels colder than the wooden aisle, and a faint draft finds your wrists where the jacket sleeves rise. You wring the cloth into a pail, hearing the water strike with a soft, irregular patter. A cleaner follows with warm, soapy water for the seat edges and window ledges. The scent reaches you before the pail appears, clean and slightly sharp among the older tram smells. You shift to the forward half while she begins behind you, and your tools pass one another without touching. Years of shared work make conversation unnecessary, though you exchange a few quiet words about the thickening snowfall beyond the windows. Outside, flakes have begun to descend more closely, whitening the yard between the dark rails. They appear yellow when crossing the depot lamps, and blue-grey beneath the afternoon sky. Some whirl through the open doors and settle upon the tram roof, while others melt against the threshold at once. You glance toward them whenever you straighten, watching winter remake the yard one thin layer at a time. The cleaned aisle is checked from both directions. Damp boards reflect the ceiling lamps, and the seat supports cast narrow shadows across them. You notice a ticket corner caught behind a pipe and free it with the hand brush, then wipe one last muddy mark beside the door. The tram is ready for whatever comes next, whether another period of service or a longer wait along the depot wall. When you step down, the low tray beneath the car is nearly full. You lift it with both hands, keeping the water level below the rim, and carry it toward the drain in short, even steps. Black particles turn slowly in the grey liquid. As you pour, a small patch of clean metal appears at the tray's bottom, then vanishes again beneath the final wash of grit. The next tram arrives before the first one has cooled. Its bell sounds outside, and the great doors open farther to admit it, allowing a fresh bank of snow-laden air to move beneath the roof. You retreat to the safe walkway with your tools, feeling the cold sweep around your ankles. Steel wheels enter upon shining rails, and the building answers with a low resonance that you feel through your soles. This car has been working a busier route, and its floor bears the evidence. Sand covers the platforms in a pale, gritty layer, while damp paper has gathered beneath several seats. A broken shoelace lies near the center aisle, knotted at one end and frayed at the other. You pick it up before sweeping, because long cords tangle themselves around broom fibers and make a simple task needlessly awkward. There are more voices around this arrival. The conductor counts something quietly with the clerk, while a mechanic asks the driver about a sound heard during braking. Nobody speaks loudly, yet the combined murmur fills the depot for several minutes. You work along the outer edge, where listening matters more than joining the discussion, and the broom's softer brush becomes one thread within the broader conversation. A small wooden bead emerges from beneath the rear bench. It has a hole through the middle, and a faint trace of blue paint around one side, perhaps from a child's toy or necklace. You place it beside the polished chestnut found earlier. The two objects touch with a delicate click, strangers brought together by the tramway and your patient search along the floorboards. The work near the doors repeats what you've done before, but no repetition is perfectly empty. This car's threshold has a deeper corner, and its right step holds more sand than the left. One window leaks a thin line of cold air, making the frost beside it thicker. Your hands notice such differences without needing to name them, adjusting the angle of cloth and brush until the familiar task suits this particular tram. By now, your jacket carries a fine mixture of scents from the day. There's soap near one cuff, metal dust along a sleeve, and old coffee lingering faintly around the collar. The wool itself smells warm where your body has heated it through hours of work. These traces are ordinary enough to escape your notice until a cold draft lifts them, and then the whole shift seems present in a single breath. The conductor has finished at the office and returns to retrieve a scarf forgotten on the platform. He thanks you for setting it aside, though you barely remember doing so among the earlier cleaning. The scarf is dark wool, still holding the curved shape of the neck that wore it. He wraps it once beneath his coat collar, and the object becomes part of a person again, instead of an entry in lost property. Such returns offer a quiet satisfaction. Most items pass through your hands without finding their owners while you watch, but occasionally A glove, coin purse, or tool is reclaimed before the shift ends. There's no ceremony in the exchange. A name is checked, a description given, and the object leaves the wooden box, carrying with it the small relief of something misplaced and then found. Another afternoon car enters, followed by a pause long enough for you to clean the floor between roads. The repeated arrivals have drawn snowmelt into branching patterns, each one following the concrete's slight slopes. You push the water toward the drain, while it is still clear enough to move freely. The squeegee makes a low rubber sigh, and the wet bands gather before it like narrow sheets of dark glass. At the drain, the basket has begun to fill again with street sand. You lift the grate and remove the heavy paste with a scoop, noticing how much of Oslo's winter can collect within a few hours. The mixture is coarse between the tool and iron, and smells of stone, smoke, and cold water. You rinse the openings, replace the basket, and watch the next shallow stream disappear without hesitation into the pipe. The afternoon light is already fading, as winter daylight in Oslo never lingers as generously as summer light. High windows that brightened around noon begin turning grey, then slowly reflect the lamps within the depot instead of the sky outside. Workers light the shaded fixtures, one row at a time. Each lamp adds a pool of warmth, and shadows settle more deeply behind the standing cars. This change in light marks another part of your round. You visit the corners that daylight had briefly opened, checking whether dust remains beneath benches, radiators, and storage racks. The hand lamp comes with you again, casting a low beam along the floor. Small objects throw long shadows at that angle, so a nail appears larger than your finger until you lift it and feel its modest weight in your glove. The nail is straight and scarcely rusted. It goes into the found metal tin rather than the refuse bucket, joining the tack and several washers. You shake the tin once and hear the day's little collection answer. The sound is brighter than the dust around it. Useful fragments remain useful when someone takes the time to separate them, and this principle accompanies nearly every quiet task in the depot. Beside the radiator, heat has baked a layer of dust into soft grey rolls. You loosen them with the hand brush, careful not to touch the warm pipes with bare skin. The air here smells dry, with a faint scorched quality that disappears once the dirt is removed. Your brush passes between the wall and pipe brackets, sending several hidden crumbs into view before gathering them neatly upon the pan. A dead leaf appears among them, brittle and brown despite the snow outside. It must have entered weeks earlier, perhaps on a passenger's shoe or through an autumn door left open for a moving tram. The leaf breaks at the first touch of the brush, releasing a dry, earthy smell, so faint that you almost imagine it. You sweep the fragments together, and the last trace of another season enters your bucket. The radiators click as warm water travels through their pipes. Their heat never conquers the vast depot, but it keeps offices, break rooms, and nearby work areas from becoming severe. You stand beside one for a moment while changing brushes, letting warmth reach the side of your trousers. Then you continue toward the colder wall, carrying a little of that comfort with you in the loosened muscles of your leg. Near the wash rack, several tram mats wait to be cleaned. They are heavy with grit and dampness, their ridged surfaces darkened almost to black. You and another cleaner lift the first between you, keeping it level until it reaches the draining area. When you lower it, trapped sand falls with a muffled rush, spreading across the wet stone like grain from a split sack. The mat is brushed from both ends with stiff hand tools. Mud releases from the grooves in thick lines, and cold water carries it toward the grated channel. You work steadily, turning the mat only after one face is clear. Its rubber has a dense, smoky smell, and the ridges press through your gloves whenever you grip the edge, leaving temporary lines upon your palms. A rinse reveals the mat's original pattern. Water beads across the raised surface, then joins into streams that run from one corner. You prop it upon a wooden rack, where air can move around both sides. It won't dry completely before being kneaded, but much of the moisture will drain away. The second mat takes its place, bringing another load of sand from countless passenger boots across the city. Working together gives the task a gentle counter-rhythm. You brush while your companion rinses, then exchange positions without speaking. The water sounds fuller against the second mat, and splashes darken the lower legs of your trousers. Neither of you minds. Wet cuffs and gritty gloves belong to winter depot work, and the stove will lend enough warmth during the next pause to make them bearable again. The third mat contains a brass button lodged deeply between two ridges. You free it with the wooden end of the brush, taking care not to scratch its face. An emblem remains visible beneath a film of dirt, though you don't know whether it came from a uniform or an overcoat. Rinsed beneath the tap, it gives a muted gleam and joins the other found belongings in the wooden box. Once the mats are arranged on the rack, you sweep the released sand from the draining area. Wet grains resist the broom, so you use the flat shovel to lift them in dense, dark scoops. Each load has surprising weight. The pail handle presses a narrow line into your glove, and you change hands halfway to the bin, allowing one set of fingers to rest while the other bears the load. A little sand remains inside the shovel's corners after emptying. You rinse it with a cup of water and tap the blade lightly against the drain edge. The iron answers with a dull note, deeper now that the blade is wet. You wipe the handle where muddy gloves have touched it, then place the shovel upright in its rack with the edge facing safely toward the wall. When the bell marks the later afternoon pause, the break room windows have turned black enough to mirror the table and stove. Snow touches the outer glass and melts into clear tracks, giving the reflected room a wavering surface. You sit near the warmth and open your tin for the last small piece of bread. The crust has hardened since noon, but coffee softens it, and its familiar taste settles gently into the evening. The workers who began later in the day now occupy some of the benches. Their coats are colder, their faces newly reddened from the streets, and their conversation carries a little more energy than the dawn group's quiet speech. You listen while warming both hands around your cup. They speak about road conditions, a delayed delivery, and a troublesome cupboard latch. Ordinary matters softened by steam and the stove's steady heat. A wall calendar hangs near the window, its picture showing a summer landscape brighter than anything outside. Green fields run toward blue water beneath a generous sky, and the paper seems almost luminous in the lamplight. You glance at it while chewing, imagining for a moment how the depot doors stand open in warmer months. Then snow taps the window again, and winter returns without any sense of disappointment. Every season changes your work without changing its purpose. Summer dust is light and quick to rise. Autumn brings leaves and wet earth, while winter delivers sand, soot, and slush in heavy layers. Spring has its own grey mud, carried inward as frozen streets soften. The broom remains in your hands through all of it, meeting each season at floor level and quietly removing what the passing city leaves behind. The break ends with cups turned upside down to drain beside the basin. You brush crumbs from the table into your palm and tighten the damp cuff around one wrist. Outside the room, the depot sounds fuller than before. More cars have returned, their lamps glowing in several rows, and voices move among them while evening service is arranged beneath the darkening roof. The first evening task is to clear the walking paths between the newly parked trams. These paths receive the dirt of every worker crossing from platform to office, and they can't wait until all movement stops. You sweep in sections, pausing whenever someone carries tools or equipment through. A mechanic steps around your small heap with practiced ease, while you draw it aside and let the necessary traffic pass without breaking the calm rhythm. Wet boot prints overlap upon the concrete, some broad and deeply ridged, others narrow and already fading at the heel. You don't chase each print as it appears. Instead, you wait until a stretch of path is briefly quiet, then sweep the sand and guide the moisture toward the side. Cleaning a working depot requires this patience, because the floor belongs to movement before it belongs to any wish for lasting neatness. At one crossing, the rail tops have become slippery with a thin film of dirty water. You wipe them only after the road is secured, using a coarse cloth wrapped around the proper tool so your hands remain clear of the groove. The polished steel emerges beneath the grey film, cold and bright. A drop slides along its edge, gathers beneath a joint, and falls with a sound too small to hear beyond your place. The tram beside you releases a soft hiss from its equipment as the driver completes a check. Warm air moves from beneath the body, carrying the smell of brake dust and oil. You step back, though the car remains still, and wait until the driver nods before continuing. Courtesy and safety share the same quiet gestures here, built from attention rather than alarm, and repeated until they feel entirely ordinary. Inside that tram, the conductor is checking straps, windows, and door movement before another departure. You can hear each fitting tested in sequence. A leather strap creaks, a window catch clicks, and the door closes against its frame with a padded thump. Your broom moves beneath those sounds along the outer walkway, and for several minutes both routines proceed side by side, like two parts of the same clock. A passenger would rarely imagine this interval between journeys. To someone waiting at a stop, a tram simply arrives from the snowy distance with lights in its windows. Yet here, you see the pauses that make arrival possible. The check of a latch, the wiping of a step, the clearing of grit, and the brief exchange of information between workers who know the car by number and sound. Your own name may never appear upon a public timetable, but your schedule is no less exact. Certain floors must be cleared before evening departures, certain bins emptied before they overflow, and certain tools washed before dirt dries into their fibers. You measure the passing hours through these needs. The clock confirms what your body already knows, because shoulders, hands, and appetite each carry their own quiet sense of time. A car bound for evening service stands ready near the open doors. Its destination sign has been set, and its interior glows with clean yellow light. You make a final pass along the platform, catching 3 grains of gravel and a damp thread near the step. Then you withdraw your broom, remove the small warning marker, and tell the conductor the cleaning is complete with a brief lift of your hand. The driver takes his place, and the tram begins moving outward. Snow crosses the headlamp beam in thick, slow lines, making the yard beyond appear deeper than it is. The wheels pass over the threshold, and the bell rings once as the car enters the evening street. Warm windows recede between the doors, carrying your swept floor back into Oslo's gathering darkness. You watch only until the road is clear, then turn toward the damp trail left behind. Snow shaken from the underframe has fallen in soft grey clumps, each one holding a little grit. You break them gently with the scraper and push the melt toward the drain. The work follows every departure in miniature. First the moving car, then the open space, then your broom restoring order beneath the lamps. Another service car leaves several minutes later, exposing a patch that has remained covered since noon. The concrete beneath is dry, but dust has settled around the wheel positions and along the inner rail. You sweep lengthwise, keeping the fibers clear of the groove until permission is given for closer work. Dry grit makes a lighter sound here, like sand moved across paper, and the broom travels with an easy stroke, A small dark cylinder rolls from beneath the departed car and stops against your boot. It is a pencil cap, or perhaps part of a tool, made from hard rubber and grooved near one end. You don't recognize it, so it goes into the mechanic's found parts tray. Uncertainty has its own proper place in the depot. An object needn't be understood immediately, to be kept from the rubbish bin. Einar examines it later and identifies it as a protective cover from a small fitting. He takes it with him to compare against the equipment in the pit. You accept the explanation without needing more detail, pleased that the object wasn't swept away. Your work often ends where another person's knowledge begins, and the handover is usually no more elaborate than a few words beside the rail. The snowfall strengthens outside. Workers close the depot doors as far as operations allow, reducing the broad opening to the space needed for each arriving or departing car. Wind presses loose flakes through the remaining gaps, building pale ridges along the inner threshold. You sweep them outward before they melt, using a wide wooden snow pusher that feels broad and light compared with the iron shovel. Fresh snow moves almost silently. It rolls ahead of the wooden edge, clean at first, then grey as it gathers soot from the threshold. You push it beyond the doors into a low bank beside the cleared path. The air outside touches your face with immediate cold, and tiny flakes settle upon your eyebrows before warmth turns them into moisture against your skin. The yard rails must remain visible where workers walk and where points are inspected. Clearing the whole yard belongs to a larger effort, but you help at the entrance by brushing snow from the grooves and around the moving parts. The track staff have secured the area for this task. You kneel only where instructed, using the long-handled brush, while another worker watches the road and the falling snow. Beneath the fresh layer lies older compacted ice, roughened by sand and darkened by smoke. You don't attempt to remove what has become part of the frozen yard without the proper crew and tools. Instead, you clear the loose snow, expose the rail edges, and make the walking strip easier to see. Your brush leaves parallel marks that fill slowly as more flakes descend from the sky. A yard lamp stands above you, its shade wearing a white cap. Snow passing near it flashes briefly, then disappears into the darkness below. The depot behind looks warm from this side, with rows of lamps and tram windows held inside the high wooden doors. You hear brooms, muted voices, and the ring of metal from the shop, all softened by the snow-covered ground around your feet. For a few breaths, the city beyond the yard seems very far away. Chimneys rise as darker shapes against the low sky, and a church bell reaches you with its edges blurred by weather. Then a tram bell answers from the street, closer and more practical, announcing another car approaching the depot. You lift the brush, step into the designated safe place, and watch the headlamp emerge through the falling white. The arriving car carries snow thickly along its front and lower panels. Its wiper has cleared a fan across the window, leaving white crust around the edges. As it enters, loose snow slides from the roof in powdery veils and scatters over the threshold you just cleared. You don't resent the return of the work. A swept entrance exists to receive another tram, just as a made bed exists to be slept in again. Once the car stops, you brush the new snow away before it can be trampled into ice. The wooden pusher travels over the threshold in broad, slow passes. Your companion clears the opposite rail, and together you uncover the dark steel once more. The snowfall continues beyond the door, but inside there is now a clean boundary where wheels, boots and brooms can meet the winter with a little more order. Back beneath the roof, your cap is damp around the edge, and your cheeks retain a pleasant coldness. You hang the snow brush near the entrance, where meltwater can fall into a shallow tray. The ordinary broom feels warmer when you take it up. Its handle has been stored away from the door, and the wood seems almost soft after the outdoor iron, snow, and wind. The newly arrived tram won't be cleaned immediately. Its crew must report, and the mechanics need to hear about anything noticed during the route. You use the waiting time to sweep beneath the benches along the wall, where workers sit to change boots or sort tools. The floor there contains wood shavings, crumbs, a twist of tobacco paper, and several black grains that smell faintly of coal. One bench leg has loosened enough to shift when the broom touches it. You steady the seat with your hand, then leave a chalk mark nearby and tell the carpenter. He arrives with a small wooden wedge and examines the joint beneath the lamplight. The repair takes only a few minutes, but you sweep around him rather than watching, hearing the gentle tap of his mallet blend with the fibers against the floor. When he finishes, the bench stands firmly again. A curl of shaved wood and 2 grains of old glue lie beneath it, which your broom gathers in one stroke. The carpenter runs his palm across the seat, presses down near the repaired end, and returns to his workshop. The whole exchange leaves no document beyond perhaps a note in a ledger, only a stable bench and a clean patch of concrete. The tram crew has now left the newly arrived car, and the road is released. You board with a pail, cloths, and the narrow broom. Warm, damp air closes around you at once, carrying more tobacco smoke than the earlier cars, and a sweet trace of perfume near the middle seats. The windows are almost entirely misted, and the depot lamps beyond them appear as round, blurred patches of gold. Passenger footprints cover the floor so densely that no single journey can be followed. Heels overlap toes, sand lies in every groove, and water has gathered beneath the seats. You begin at the far platform, absorbing the deepest puddles before bringing the broom down. Damp dirt clings more readily than dry dust, so every few strokes you clean the fibers against the edge of the pan. A crumpled handbill sticks to the floor near the door. Water has softened the paper, until lifting it by one corner would tear it into pieces. You slide the shovel beneath it, preserving the whole wet sheet, long enough to transfer it into the refuse pail. A colored patch of ink remains visible, but the words have bled into one another and no longer carry a clear message. Under the next seat rests a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with cotton string. Unlike the earlier scraps, it is dry and carefully made, so you leave it untouched until the conductor or clerk can attend. You set your warning pail near the seat, step down, and ask for the lost property procedure to be followed. The parcel waits where you found it, quiet and square beneath the bench. The clerk arrives with the conductor who worked the route. Together, they inspect the label without opening the wrapping, then record the car and location. The parcel is lifted gently and carried to the office, its string making a shallow groove across the paper. You remove the pail from the aisle and resume sweeping, leaving behind only a clean rectangle where the forgotten object had rested against the boards. Near the same seat, your broom finds a child's wooden spinning top. Its red paint is chipped around the widest part, and the point has darkened from use. You lift it by its little stem and turn it once between your fingers. Though you don't set it spinning upon the tram floor, it joins the bead, button, and chestnut in the tray, another small object waiting beneath the office lamp. The found things give no account of themselves. Perhaps the parcel contains mended clothing, and perhaps the top rolled from a pocket while a child slept against a parent's coat. You don't need to decide. Your task is only to notice, protect, and pass them onward. Imagination remains gentle when it doesn't insist upon an answer, and the broom moves on through the warm carriage. At the front platform, sand has mixed with a fine layer of coal soot. The combination stains the cloth almost black, though the floor beneath cleans with several steady passes. You wipe the corners, brush the grooves, and empty the pan twice before the metal tread appears. A draft beneath the door cools the sweat along your neck, reminding you that winter waits only a thin panel away from your hands. The cleaner working beside you hums under her breath, a tune without words, and scarcely louder than the cloth moving across varnished wood. You don't recognize it, but its even rise and fall suits the work. For several minutes, the tune, the broom, and the drip into the pail keep a shared measure. Then the humming fades naturally, leaving the same calm silence from which it came. You finish the interior by sweeping backward toward the open door, keeping the cleaned aisle before you. The last heap contains mostly sand, softened paper, and one pale thread. It slides onto the pan with a final stroke. You descend, set the tools upon the platform, and look once along the length of the car, where damp boards gleam beneath lights reflected in the misted glass. A worker opens 2 windows slightly to let moisture escape while the tram rests. Cold air enters at once, setting the hanging straps into barely visible motion. The perfume and tobacco scents begin to thin, replaced by soap, wet wood, and winter. You collect your pails and step onto the depot floor as the car settles around the changing temperature with faint ticks from metal and timber. Evening has fully covered Oslo now, though the depot remains bright enough for work to continue without strain. Outside the windows, there is only darkness, falling snow, and the occasional sweep of a passing headlamp. Inside, lamps make the rails shine in narrow lines. Your shadow lengthens beside you whenever you cross a road, carrying the broom at an angle across the pale floor. The refuse bins need emptying before the final returns bring another load of grit. You secure the lids, then move each smaller container to the collection area using a low handcart. Its iron wheels click across joints in the concrete, and the handle presses cool against your gloves. Paper shifts softly in one bin, while damp sweepings settle with a heavier sound in another as the cart crosses each shallow ridge. You don't overfill a container merely to save a journey. A manageable load can be lifted steadily, without spilling dirt across the path or straining tired hands. At the collection area, you sort the contents according to depot practice, keeping metal, oily waste, ash, and ordinary refuse apart. The work smells stronger here, but cold air enters through a vent and carries much of it upward and away. The paper bin contains old timetables, ticket fragments, wrapping, and newspapers too damaged for further reading. You press nothing down with bare hands, because pins or sharp pieces may be hidden within. Instead, you use a wooden paddle, applying only enough pressure to settle the loose upper layer. The papers sigh together and hold their new shape, their printed journeys and yesterday's words folded into patient silence. The scrap metal container is smaller but far heavier. Washers, wire ends, filings, and worn fittings lie together with a dull metallic shine. You add the day's approved pieces, leaving unidentified parts in the mechanic's tray until they've been examined. When the lid closes, it does so with a firm iron sound that travels along the wall and fades beneath the roof's dark beams. Oily cloths remain in their covered receptacle, away from heat and open flame. You check that the lid sits correctly and that nothing has fallen beside it. The smell of lubricant clings near the container, dense and slightly bitter. A scattering of absorbent granules has escaped onto the floor, so you sweep them with the designated brush and return them to the proper place. Once the bins are arranged, you rinse the handcart wheels where mud has collected around their rims. The wheel turns beneath your gloved hand, while a thin stream of water carries black grit toward the drain. You dry the axle fittings with a rag, and leave the cart handle facing outward for the next worker. Even equipment used for rubbish receives care, because neglect begins in corners and spreads through a workplace by habit. The foreman passes on his round, checking doors, roads, lamps, and the order of tools near each station. He pauses to ask whether the entrance drain is running freely. You tell him it was cleared after the last arrivals and point to the cleaned basket. He nods, makes a small pencil mark in his book, and continues toward the pit with the unhurried step of someone measuring the depot through routine. Your own round turns toward the staff corridor, where snow from incoming boots has made the tiles gritty. The corridor is narrower and warmer than the shed, with hooks along one wall and notice boards along the other. You use the softer broom here, sweeping from the office end toward the outer door. The bristles make a hushed sound upon tile, and the grit forms a thin wavering line ahead of your feet. A notice has come loose at one corner and hangs slightly away from the board. You don't read beyond what is needed, but you press the pin back with the wooden end of your pencil. The paper lies flat again, its typed rows neat beneath the glass lamp. Below it, a muddy splash marks the skirting board, so you wipe it with a damp cloth until the painted wood returns to its muted cream color. The office door opens, releasing warmer air scented with ink, paper, and coffee. Inside, the clerk bends over the ledger while the recovered parcel rests upon a side table. The child's top stands beside it, its red paint bright under the desk lamp. You carry the coin tin and other found objects to the counter, where each item is counted and recorded before passing from your care. The clerk asks where the chestnut was found, and you recall the tram and approximate seat. He smiles faintly at the object, then enters it with the others despite its lack of value. Record keeping doesn't judge affection. A smooth seed may matter more to someone than a coin, and the wooden box remains open to both until owners appear or the proper waiting period has passed. Your pencil stub is shorter after helping with 2 location notes. You compare it with the one found beneath the seat, then choose the longer for your pocket and place the other in the office cup. It may serve for one final label. Nothing changes suddenly from useful to useless here. Things diminish through stages, offering smaller services as they become worn, blunt, patched, or faded. Back in the main shed, another sequence of trams is expected from evening service. Before they arrive, you check the broom rack and prepare dry tools for the heavier cleaning ahead. 2 pails are empty, 3 cloths have dried near the radiator, and the groove scraper has collected grit around its blade. You wipe it clean and test the handle, feeling the solid join beneath your thumb. The scraper's edge has dulled, but remains even. When it becomes too rounded for packed dirt, the metal workers will dress it upon their tools, removing only enough material to restore its usefulness. You don't attempt that work yourself. Knowing the limits of a roll is part of knowing it well, and you place the scraper beside the pails, ready for the street mud soon to come through the doors. A distant vibration enters the rails. It is too faint for the ear at first, but your boots feel it through the floor, and you lift your head before the bell sounds outside. Other workers also pause, each moving toward an accustomed position. The depot doors begin to open, their rollers murmuring overhead, and darkness appears between them, thick with gently falling snow. The tram's headlamp grows from a pale spot into a wide beam. Snow turns within it, some flakes rising in the disturbed air, while others descend almost vertically. The car enters slowly, windows glowing and roof whitened along its forward edge. You stand beside the prepared tools, feeling cold flow past your trousers as the wheels cross the threshold and settle upon the inner rails. Passengers are no longer aboard, yet the tram seems to carry the city inside it. Its steps hold sand from crowded stops, and its windows retain faint outlines where faces and gloved hands warmed the glass. The conductor steps down tired but composed, ticket bag heavy at the hip. You wait while the final paperwork begins, then listen for the familiar word that releases the road to cleaning. Before boarding, you walk around the accessible side with your lamp held low. Nothing unusual lies beneath the doors, though one strip of paper clings to a wheel guard where melting snow has pasted it flat. You leave anything close to the running gear for the designated worker and mention the paper to the mechanic. He removes it safely with a long tool after confirming the car's condition. Inside, the air is warmer than any car you've entered today. The lamps have heated the upper compartment, while passengers' coats and breath have left moisture upon every window. A thin fog hangs near the ceiling when the door first opens. You stand aside to let it drift out, then carry in the broom, pail, cloths, and hand brush for the slow work beneath the seats. The floor is thick with winter grit. You begin by removing the larger paper pieces so they won't break beneath the broom. A folded shopping list lies near the aisle, written in soft pencil and smudged by water. You see only a few ordinary words before placing it among the refuse. Traces of bread, milk, soap, and potatoes from a household preparing for its own quiet evening. A single orange peel has been wrapped in paper beneath a seat. Its fresh scent escapes when the package shifts, bright and almost summery within the damp tram. Oranges are not everyday fruit in every Oslo household, and someone has taken care not to leave the peel loose. You lift the parcel into the waste pail, where the fragrance lingers above soap, sand, and wet paper. The broom pushes a broad ridge from the far platform toward the center. You stop often to lift it, because forcing too much dirt ahead would send grit back beneath the benches. Each panful lands heavily in the pail. The floor emerges plank by plank, its damp varnish reflecting your hands, and the broom handle in long, wavering shapes that break whenever you move. Near the middle doors, a small puddle conceals a glass marble. You see a blue glimmer before the cloth passes over it, and reach down carefully. The marble is smooth, cold, and striped within by a curl of colored glass. It joins the spinning top at the office, though for now it rests safely in your buttoned pocket, a tiny weight against the fabric beside your pencil. Your knees bend, your shoulders turn, and the narrow brush reaches into another corner. The work continues at the same patient pace, while snow gathers beyond the glass. A clock somewhere in the depot marks another quarter hour with a subdued mechanism, too quiet for most workers to notice. You hear it because your broom has paused, and then the fibers return to the floor with their soft, steady scrape. Outside the car, a mechanic moves a lamp beneath the frame, throwing a traveling glow across the lower panels. His shadow passes over the misted windows, enlarged and softened until it disappears toward the rear platform. You continue from seat to seat, trusting the secured tram and the routines surrounding it. Each person occupies a different layer of the same car, joined by steel, timber, light, and care. The pail is full before you reach the front. You carry it down the steps with one hand on the rail, set it beside the road, and return with an empty one. Cold depot air touches the warmth gathered beneath your jacket, and the marble shifts gently in your pocket. Then you climb aboard again, where the unswept forward boards wait beneath lamps blurred by wet windows. Another shopping bag lies folded beneath the driver's platform, but this one is clean enough to reuse. You shake away 2 grains of sand, fold it along its creases, and set it with the salvage paper. A length of string remains tied around one handle. You unwind it rather than cutting, coil it loosely, and place it in the supply tin where short cords are kept for labels and bundles. By now, the orange scent has faded, leaving warm wood and soap in the compartment. The cleaner has begun wiping the rear windows, and clear rectangles appear within the mist. Through them, you see the depot lamps with sharper edges and the snow beyond as fine white threads. Your broom reaches the forward step, gathering the last dark fan of grit into a neat, manageable line. You lift that line in 3 panfuls, then brush the corners once more. A conductor's punched ticket is wedged beside the threshold, swollen by water until the card has become soft. The hand brush frees it without tearing, though it bends upon the pan and settles into the pail. You wipe the metal strip, wring the cloth, and watch grey water spiral from your hands into the waiting bucket. When you leave the tram, the marble goes directly to the office before it can be forgotten inside your pocket. The clerk places it beside the wooden top, where blue glass and chipped red paint catch the same circle of lamplight. You give the car and seat location, then return to the road with your empty pocket feeling oddly lighter against your coat. More wheels sound beyond the doors. The night's returning cars are beginning to arrive closer together now, each one bringing another portion of Oslo's snow, dust, damp paper, and human warmth beneath the depot roof. You draw a fresh pail from the rack and lay a dry cloth across its rim. Beside you, the doors roll open once more, and the broom waits in your hands while pale flakes turn slowly through the approaching light. The approaching tram enters with a deeper rumble than the last, because packed snow has muffled the yard, while amplifying every sound beneath the depot roof. Its front window carries a narrow, clear arc made by the wiper, and ice feathers cling around the destination sign. You watch the wheels pass the threshold at their walking pace, then wait beside the wall until the car is secured and the workers give their customary nod. This tram has finished a long portion of its evening duty, and the conductor's shoulders lower slightly when both boots reach the concrete. A faint rattle comes from the coins inside the changer as the leather bag is lifted away. The driver rubs one gloved palm with the other, warming fingers that have spent hours near a cold window. You remain beside your tools while their reports are given, letting the car release its stored warmth into the depot. When you step aboard, the floor feels gently alive beneath you, ticking and settling as metal cools around the wooden compartment. Condensation has gathered beneath the window frames and runs toward the corners in clear beads. A damp scarf smell lingers near the rear seats, mixed with pipe tobacco and the earthy scent of snow-soaked leather. You set the pail inside the door and begin where the sand is deepest. Several passengers have carried spruce needles aboard, perhaps from bundles sold for winter decoration or from branches brushing against coats. The needles lie among ticket scraps, thin and dark green against the wet floorboards. They release a faint resin scent beneath the broom, clean and forest-like for only a moment. Then they join the sand upon the pan, and the ordinary tram smells close gently over them again. You work around a pair of iron seat supports whose bases trap grit in narrow crescents. The hand brush reaches where the long handle cannot, and each small stroke brings another line of grey particles into view. Your left knee rests briefly upon a folded cloth to keep it from the damp floor. The position is familiar, and you rise without haste whenever another worker needs room to pass through the aisle. A cleaner carries a pail of warmer water onto the rear platform, sending a curl of steam into the colder air near the open door. She begins with the window ledges, where drops have mixed with dust to form thin black lines. You keep several seats ahead of her cloth, and together you move toward the front. The space between your tasks remains small but comfortable, held by years of quiet practice. Under one bench, you find a pair of spectacles inside a worn leather case. The clasp has opened, but the glass remains unbroken beneath a film of dust. You close the case carefully and place it on the ledge beside your pail, far from any passing boot. Someone may discover their absence upon reaching for a newspaper at home, and the lost property clerk will keep them safe beneath the office lamp. The spectacles leave a clean shape in the dust where the case had rested. You sweep around that little outline, then across it, removing the last sign that anything was there. Objects pass through the depot in this manner, present for an hour, and then carried onward. The floor remembers them only until your broom arrives, though the ledger may preserve a few plain words about a brown case found beneath the third seat. A sweet wrapper clings to the wall beside the next support. Its color has run slightly into the dampness, leaving a pale stain upon the paper. You peel it away with the corner of the shovel and wipe the panel with a cloth. The stain fades after 2 slow passes, while the wrapper folds in upon itself and disappears among the darker contents of the refuse pail. At the forward platform, you notice that the tread is cleaner than the rear one. Perhaps most passengers boarded behind, or perhaps the conductor swept a little sand outward during a quiet moment at the terminus. You don't need to know which explanation is right. Your task adjusts to what the floor presents, spending more time where dirt is thick and less where the boards already show their smooth, worn grain. The driver's platform carries a delicate sprinkling of snow blown through a narrow gap. Each flake survives for only a breath on the dark surface, shrinking to a bright drop before vanishing into the dampness. You wipe the area with a nearly dry cloth, leaving no water near the controls. The brass and painted metal above remain untouched, belonging to checks made by hands trained for that work. Once the interior is clear, you carry the spectacles to the office. The clerk opens the case just enough to record the round frames, then closes it again and places it beside the other found things. The marble and spinning top are still there, bright little points among gloves, parcels and papers. You give the tram number and seat position, and the pencil scratches softly across the page. Back at the road, snow melt has spread from the car's steps toward the central drain. You take up the squeegee and draw the water into a narrower band, catching ticket pulp and grit before they clog the grate. The rubber blade bends slightly against the floor, leaving a dry path behind it. Overhead lamps stretch and shorten in the moving water, their reflections broken by every grain of sand. The drain basket receives another dense scoop. You lift it with both hands, feeling water escape through the holes while heavier material remains. A cigarette end, softened almost beyond recognition, rests among the grit, along with a fragment of woolen thread and a thin strip of bark. You tip everything into the proper pail, rinse the basket, and settle it beneath the grate with a muted iron click. Another tram waits outside until its road is clear. Through the doors, you see its headlamp glowing upon the snowy points, while a worker signals from beside the track. You move your pails fully against the wall, check that the squeegee handle cannot fall, and stand in the safe walkway. The incoming car glides over the exposed rails, carrying a white ridge of snow along the edge of its roof. The repeated arrivals divide the night into manageable portions. Each tram asks for the same broad sequence, yet each brings a different arrangement of dirt, forgotten belongings, and small mechanical observations. You never face the whole row at once. One platform, one aisle, one wet patch, and one pail are enough to occupy your hands, while the clock continues its steady course above the office. This car smells more strongly of tobacco, though a notice asks passengers to observe the rules governing where smoking is permitted. Smoke has entered coats and wood, settling into the warm, damp air long after pipes and cigarettes were put away. You open the door fully and wait for the first thickness to drift outward. Cold air replaces it, carrying soap and snow into the compartment before your broom begins its round. The rear seats have collected scraps of conversation in the form of objects. There is a tram ticket folded around a match, a theatre handbill creased into a fan, and a pencil line drawn absent-mindedly upon a newspaper margin. You see these details only as you sort paper from grit. Their makers remain unknown, and the evening's thoughts have become simple materials beneath your careful fingers. The theatre handbill is dry enough for paper salvage. Its printed border shows through the folds, though you don't open it to study the names. You smooth the largest crease so it will lie flat, then place it with the newspaper. Somewhere in Oslo, the performance may still be underway, but inside the depot, its abandoned notice rests beside old timetables and wrappers in a quiet paper stack. A leather glove lies between the wall and a bench, palm upward as if waiting to be taken. It is an adult's left glove, dark brown, with stitching worn pale around the thumb. You brush the dust from its cuff and place it beside the spectacles at the office. One glove without the other seems especially noticeable in winter, and perhaps its owner will remember the tram before morning comes. You return to find the cleaner wringing a cloth over grey water. The pail gives off a faint warmth, and a little steam rises around her hands. You take the opposite side of the aisle, sweeping grit loosened from beneath the seat edges. Neither task undoes the other, because you've learned where dampness should travel and where the broom must remain dry until the last loose grains are gathered. A metal hair clip catches in the fibers. You feel the resistance before seeing it and stop rather than pulling harder. With two gloved fingers, you free the clip from the broom and place it in the found object tin. The fibers fall back into their proper shape, and the next stroke runs cleanly beneath the seat, carrying a soft wave of sand toward the aisle. At the front, a folded wool cap has been tucked behind the platform partition. It may belong to a worker rather than a passenger, so you call the conductor before moving it. He recognizes the cap as another conductor's and takes it toward the staff room. The wool leaves a faint smell of wet snow where it rested, and you wipe the narrow shelf before closing the little partition door. When the tram is finished, your pail is too heavy to carry comfortably in one hand. You lift it with both, holding it close enough that the load doesn't swing. Damp refuse settles toward one side whenever you turn, asking you to place each foot carefully on the steps. At the bottom, you rest the pail for a moment, then transfer it to the handcart for the journey to the bins. The broad floor around the returning cars has become busy with quiet work. Mechanics carry lamps from one road to another. Cleaners exchange grey water for fresh, and drivers finish reports near the office. You follow the marked walkway with the cart, its wheels making subdued knocks over the concrete joints. Everyone alters course by inches when paths meet, and no one needs to raise a voice above the depot's low murmur. At the refuse station, damp paper lands with almost no sound. Sand follows in a dense slide, striking the bottom before spreading level. You rinse the pail and inspect its rim, where a small burr has begun catching threads from the cloth. The metal worker can smooth it later, so you mark the handle with chalk and choose another pail rather than letting the rough edge open your glove during the night. The chalk mark is a simple cross, understood by anyone using the rack. You set the pail in the repair place and tell the nearby worker what you felt. He runs a finger cautiously beside the burr, nods, and places the container upside down so nobody fills it by mistake. Small signs prevent small troubles, and the depot is full of such modest agreements carried from one shift to the next. By the time you return, the next car has already been secured. Its interior lamps are dimmer, perhaps because several have been switched off during the wait, and the compartment feels restful after the brighter roads. You bring in a hand lamp and place it where its beam reaches beneath the benches. Shadows withdraw from the floor in narrow shapes, revealing grit, paper, and the shining edge of a lost key. The key is small, made for a cupboard, drawer, or modest door rather than a house entrance. A piece of string remains threaded through its bow, but any label that once hung there is gone. You hold it beneath the lamp, noticing two simple teeth and a patch of green tarnish near the stem. It joins the clerk's collection, where perhaps someone will recognize its shape during the coming days. There's a particular care in sweeping near darkness. You move the light after every few seats, keeping its hot casing away from cloth and wood. The beam reveals dust with uncommon clarity, each grain casting a tiny shadow. Your broom crosses the illuminated patch slowly, and the floor changes from crowded texture to plain boards, the difference visible before your eyes and sensible beneath your hands. Outside the window, snow has hidden most of the yard's earlier footprints. Only the rails remain dark, with narrow cleared paths beside them. A worker passes carrying a lantern, and the moving glow appears through the misted glass like a low star. You turn back to the seat supports, where the hand lamp makes the screws shine, and the remaining dirt wait in crisp little lines. The car's floor is drier than expected. Passengers may have stamped their boots well, or the route may have avoided the deepest snow. Dry sand brushes easily, but fine dust rises if hurried. You dampen the broom just enough to make the fibers hold it, then work in long overlapping strokes that leave the air clear and the boards gently clean. Near the middle doors, a paper packet contains 2 chestnuts and a length of red yarn. It is opened at one end, spilling one smooth brown shape against the wall. You gather the pieces and fold the paper around them again. Whether they belong to a child's game or some household purpose doesn't matter. They're kept together and carried to the office as one small bundle. The clerk now has several objects awaiting labels, and you help by stating locations in the order you found them. Spectacles, glove, key, chestnuts, and hair clip each receive a line. The spinning top and marble rest together near the ink bottle. This is not your principal work, yet your attention beneath seats gives the ledger much of its nightly content, written in calm rows beneath the date and tram number. When you leave the office, the recovered brown glove is already gone. Its owner, a conductor finishing paperwork nearby, recognized it as a passenger's reported loss and arranged for it to be held under the proper name. The empty space on the counter pleases you more than the growing collection. A useful thing has begun its return journey, guided not by luck alone, but by several workers following their routine. The night watchman has started his early round through the outer corridors, testing doors and glancing toward windows as he passes. His work intersects with yours near the storage area, where you're sweeping a fresh drift of dust from beneath the radiator. He pauses while your broom crosses the doorway, then checks the latch after you move aside. His ring of keys gives a soft metallic chime against his coat. You know some of his route by sound. A distant latch closes, footsteps cross the tile, and a door settles within its frame. Later, he'll pass through the main shed and yard, noting lamps, locks, and anything that differs from the expected night. Your broom traces another kind of round, lower and slower, but both jobs depend upon looking carefully at places others assume will simply remain in order. The staff corridor has warmed enough to dry most of the earlier boot marks. What remains is pale sand, easy to gather with the soft broom. You move from the outer door toward the break room, brushing around umbrella stands and beneath the wooden bench. A button made from bone appears near the skirting, creamy white and smooth upon one side, and you add it to the office tray. A damp overcoat hangs above the bench, dropping water at slow intervals. You place a shallow pan beneath it, saving the clean floor from another muddy patch. The coat's hem smells of snow and street smoke, while the air above the radiator smells of warming wool. Each drop enters the pan with a delicate tap, spaced so widely that the silence between them becomes part of the corridor's rhythm. Inside the break room, the later shift is finishing a meal. Onion soup and coffee mingle with the stove's dry heat, while brown bread lies upon several folded papers. You aren't stopping yet, so you sweep only the threshold and leave the occupied floor for later. A worker lifts both feet as your broom passes beneath the bench edge, smiling without breaking his conversation about a worn brake shoe and tomorrow's weather. You carry the corridor sweepings to the bin, then return for the pan beneath the coat. It holds only a shallow pool, clear except for 3 black flecks. You empty it at the basin and set it back before another drop can reach the tile. The whole action takes less than a minute, but such minutes fill your shift, small acts of prevention woven between the larger stretches of cleaning. When the meal ends, chairs and benches are left slightly out of place. You wait until the room clears, then return them to their usual arrangement before sweeping. Crumbs gather near the table legs, along with a curl of onion skin and 2 grains of sugar that sparkle against the darker floor. The broom draws everything toward the stove side, where warmth has dried the boards enough for a clean, easy pass. A coffee ring remains upon the table. You wipe it with a damp cloth, following the circle until the brown mark fades into the wood grain. The table bears older rings beneath its worn finish, so you don't expect perfection. You remove what is fresh and leave the rest as part of the room's history. Quiet traces of cups held during thousands of ordinary pauses. Near the stove, a little coal dust has escaped from the scuttle. You use the designated brush rather than the clean corridor broom, gathering the black powder before it spreads beneath shoes. The dust feels unusually light upon the pan, and its smell is dry, dark, and faintly earthy. A few larger pieces return to the scuttle, while the finest residue goes where ash is properly kept. You check the stove area for paper or cloth before leaving. Nothing rests too near the iron sides, and the door is firmly latched. The heat touches your face as you bend, then falls away when you straighten. Outside the break room, the corridor seems cool and spacious, its swept tiles carrying a soft reflection of the lamps above the notice board. And as the evening shift settles deeper into night, your work returns from the staff rooms to the long roads of the OSLO Tram Depot, where more cars now rest beneath the lamps. Their roofs disappear into shadow, while their windows form quiet rows of amber rectangles. You begin along the eastern wall, checking the ground beneath each standing tram after the mechanics have released the space for sweeping. Beneath the first car, dried mud forms a speckled band around the wheel area. You use the long-handled broom so your body remains outside the narrow space, drawing loose dirt toward the walkway in patient strokes. Anything farther beneath the car waits until it can be approached according to procedure. The broom handle transmits each change in texture, from smooth concrete to grit, paper, and the faint resistance of oily dust. A flattened paper cup appears, uncommon enough to make you look twice. It has been crushed into an oval and darkened by grime, though its folded rim remains visible. You draw it clear with the broom and lift it using the shovel. The cup smells faintly of coffee beneath the stronger road dirt, and it joins the refuse carried from the passenger compartments into the bin. Near the rear wheel lies a small patch of clean sand, lighter than the surrounding floor. It may have spilled from a sanding box during inspection, so you mention it before sweeping. The mechanic checks the equipment above, finds nothing requiring immediate attention, and gives you leave to gather it. Pale grains tick against the pan, each one distinct, until the pail receives them in a soft collective rush. The next car requires no cleaning underneath because maintenance work is still in progress. A lamp burns below, and a pair of boots is visible near the pit steps. You mark the road in your mind and move onward, leaving the space entirely undisturbed. Work postponed is not work forgotten. You'll return when the mechanic emerges and the foreman confirms that broom and bucket may safely enter the area. Along the wall, a series of hooks hold extension cables, lanterns, and coiled rope. Dust gathers behind the lower coils, where the broad broom cannot reach. You lift each, only with permission, one at a time, and clean the shallow ledge beneath it. The rope smells of hemp and tar, while the cables carry rubber and warm dust, scents that remain upon your gloves after the hooks are filled again. One coil has been hung unevenly, placing its lower edge close to the floor. You rearrange it around the proper hook without tightening the loops, allowing the next worker to draw it free easily. The rope settles against the wall with a soft, fibrous sound. Beneath it, your hand brush finds 3 iron filings and a dry moth wing, delicate as paper beside the dark metal. The moth wing breaks when touched, despite your light stroke. Its pale dust merges with the floor dust and disappears upon the pan. You pause only long enough to be sure nothing remains caught behind the hook, then continue along the ledge. The depot contains many such brief endings and beginnings, too small to alter the pace, folded quietly inside the practical work of keeping surfaces clear. A narrow cupboard beside the wall stores warning signs and wooden blocks. Its lower hinge has begun to squeak, making a thin sound whenever the door opens. You wipe grit from the threshold and mention the hinge to the maintenance worker rather than applying anything yourself. Soon a drop of suitable oil quiets it, and the door closes with only the soft contact of wood against its frame. Inside, the warning signs stand with their painted faces turned outward. Some indicate wet floors, while others reserve a road or mark work beneath a car. You count them before closing the cupboard, not because inventory is formally yours tonight, but because a missing sign might have been left somewhere it no longer belongs. All are present, their wooden feet aligned in a neat row. The reserved road becomes available while you finish the cupboard. Einar climbs from the pit, carrying his lamp and a rag darkened with grease. He tells you the area below can now be cleaned, though one tray of tools remains on the upper ledge. You wait while he removes it, then fetch the short broom and pail, preparing for another descent into the cooler brickwork. The pit lamps cast a steady amber line beneath the stationary tram. Above you, wheels and underframe components form large dark shapes, each secured before your entry. You keep well within the designated walkway and touch nothing except the floor, steps, and cleaning tools. The air smells of metal, warmed by use, old oil, and the damp mineral breath of the walls. Fresh debris lies beneath the area where the mechanic worked. There are flakes of rust, crumbs of dried grease, and a short length of frayed wiping cloth that has been deliberately placed near the step for disposal. You collect them separately, leaving no loose material where the next inspection will occur. The brush makes small circles around the brick joints, drawing black dust into lines visible beneath the protected lamps. A thin drip has formed upon one pipe, but you don't assume it is ordinary condensation. You point it out to Einar before wiping the floor below. He examines the source and places a container beneath it while deciding whether further attention is needed. Your role remains simple. You noticed a new wet spot, kept the path dry, and left the judgment to someone trained to understand the pipe. The pit floor is colder tonight, perhaps because the depot doors have opened so often during the snowfall. Chill passes through your boots when you stand still, so you keep moving in measured steps. Sweep, gather, lift, and empty follow one another without strain. The short broom warms in your hands, and your breath rises faintly through the lamplight whenever you turn toward the stairs. A washer rests near the gutter, half hidden beneath oily dust. You pick it up with the small tongs kept for such pieces, wipe it, and place it in the tray. Its metal is warm compared with the brick floor. That slight warmth may mean nothing more than the nearby tram's retained heat, yet you mention where it lay when handing the tray to Einar. The gutter receives a careful brushing. You use very little water, enough to carry loose dust without spreading oily residue along the channel. The dark liquid moves toward the drain in a narrow thread, gathering beneath the grate with a quiet gurgle. You clean the brush upon a rag, Inspect the steps and count every tool before climbing back into the broader depot air. At floor level, the building sounds open and distant again. The pit's close echoes give way to wheel taps, voices, and wind pressing against the great doors. You place the oily debris in its covered container and rinse only the appropriate tools. The short broom stands aside to dry, bristles separated enough for air to reach the places where black water would otherwise remain through the night. Your gloves have darkened at the fingertips. You wash them lightly while still wearing them, rubbing one palm against the other beneath a thin stream. Grey water falls into the basin, carrying oil dust from the pit. After squeezing out the excess, you hang them near the radiator and choose the spare pair from your locker, stiffer but dry and pleasantly warm against your skin. The spare gloves have been mended across one palm with closely spaced stitches. You feel the raised thread when you grip the broom, though it doesn't interfere with your hold. Someone at home repaired them by lamplight, turning a worn place into a stronger one. The patch remains hidden during most of the shift, but your hand knows it is there with every steady stroke. A late tram enters while you are changing tools. Its arrival brings the familiar current of cold air, snow, and rail vibration, yet fatigue softens the sounds rather than sharpening them. You step to the safe side and wait, shoulders loose beneath your jacket. The car rolls inward, brake sounds fading beneath the roof, and stops with its rear platform almost level with the wash rack. This tram carries fewer traces of a crowd. Only a handful of tickets lie beneath the seats, and the sand near the doors forms two modest fans. The air smells of wet wool and a little tobacco, but the windows aren't fully misted. You begin with the rear platform, brushing the corners in long strokes that require no force, while the cleaner opens a vent to let the remaining dampness escape. A small paper envelope lies near the middle seat. It is unsealed and empty, with a name written faintly upon the front, but no address. Because it carries personal writing, you don't place it in ordinary salvage. The clerk accepts it with the other found property, recording the location before turning the written side downward upon the desk. Beneath the opposite bench, you find a knitting needle made of smooth, pale wood. It has rolled against the wall and trapped a strand of blue yarn beneath its point. You lift both together, coiling the yarn loosely so it won't tangle. The needle is light and warm from the compartment, an intimate household tool resting among industrial fittings, sand, and painted steel. The clerk places it beside the envelope, and you return to the car with your pail. There's something soothing in the way domestic objects pass through the depot. Gloves, yarn, shopping lists, bread wrappers, and buttons, all carried aboard by people moving between work and home. You meet them only after the passengers have gone, when their little traces remain in the calm spaces beneath the seats. At the forward door, a muddy footprint has dried into a clear pattern of nails and leather tread. You soften it with the damp cloth, waiting while the water enters each line. The mark blurs at the edges, then disappears beneath the brush. Another passenger will step there tomorrow, leaving another pattern, but tonight the metal returns to its plain, serviceable surface. A bell from the office marks the approach of the final meal pause for your part of the shift. You finish the platform rather than stopping midway, empty the pan, and leave the tram with its cleaning sign properly placed. The pail waits beside the road, covered so no draft can scatter its paper contents. You wash your hands and walk toward the break room through air-carrying coffee and warm barley. Only a few workers occupy the room now. The stove has been fed, and its sides glow almost imperceptibly near the lower vents. You unwrap the last food from your tin, a thick bread heel, a little cheese, and several slices of cold potato. The meal is plain, yet after hours of bending and sweeping, each bite tastes substantial, salted by appetite and softened by the cup held between your hands. You dip the bread edge into the barley broth shared from a small pot. It absorbs the warmth and becomes easier to chew, releasing the dark sweetness of rye. Steam touches your face, carrying onion and pepper in gentle traces. Outside the room, a tram moves along a road with a distant metallic murmur, but nobody rises, because other workers are guiding it through the depot. Your shoulders rest against the wall. For several minutes, the broom's weight leaves your hands, though your fingers remain curved as if still holding its handle. You flex them beside the cup and feel the stitched patch in the glove folded upon the table. Warmth enters the joints slowly, easing the day's repeated grip without removing the useful memory of the work still waiting outside. Conversation is sparse at this hour. One worker reads a few lines from the newspaper, another repairs a loose coat button, and someone near the stove closes both eyes while finishing coffee. The room doesn't demand wakefulness beyond what the remaining tasks require. You listen to thread passing through cloth, paper turning, and the spoon touching enamel with a soft, occasional note. The night watchman enters long enough to warm his hands and note the time upon a card. Snow has whitened the shoulders of his coat, and tiny drops form as it melts near the stove. He reports that the yard paths remain passable, though drifts are beginning beside the outer fence. His words settle into the room quietly, practical information shared without complaint or urgency. When the pause ends, you rinse your cup and fold the food paper for reuse if it remains clean. The bread tin closes with a small snap. You return your chair beneath the table, pull on the mended gloves, and step back into the depot, where the air feels cool enough to clear the last warmth of broth from your face. The late tram still waits with its cleaning sign beside the door. You retrieve the covered pail and resume at the exact seat where you stopped. Nothing has disturbed the gathered line of sand. Your broom meets it smoothly, carrying the ridge toward the pan, while the window cleaner works upon the outside glass with a long-handled tool and a steady hand. The exterior washing makes droplets travel down the window in bright lines. From inside, they distort the lamps and moving workers beyond, turning the depot into wavering shapes of amber, green and grey. You brush beneath the final bench and discover only a ticket punch and one thread. The quiet car seems almost ready to sleep, though it may yet be called into service before the night is done. You finish the aisle, wipe the steps, and remove the sign once the cleaner agrees the car is ready. The windows clear gradually in the cool air. Seatbacks stand in orderly rows, and the floor holds only a faint damp sheen near the doors. You step down with the pail and leave the tram resting beneath its lamps, clean, still, and available for whatever instruction comes next. The floor around its wheels remains to be swept. You wait for permission, then use the long-handled broom to draw grit outward from the accessible places. Dry sand comes first, followed by darker dust and a twist of paper. The movement is slower now, not from unwillingness, but from the settled economy of tired muscles, which choose the shortest safe path for every stroke. Beyond the doors, snow continues to fall upon the yard, filling the brush marks you made earlier and rounding the edges of every bank. Another tram bell sounds in the distance, then grows nearer through the muted city night. You set your pail against the wall, lift the broom upright, and turn toward the opening road as the rails beneath your boots begin their familiar, gentle tremor. The tremor becomes a low song beneath the rails, and the last returning tram enters the Oslo depot with snow resting softly along its roof. You stand aside until the wheels stop, then wait while the driver and conductor finish their quiet duties. When the road is released, you gather the wet sand from the steps, sweep beneath the empty seats, and guide the final ribbon of snowmelt toward the drain. The depot grows quieter around you as lamps are lowered and office doors close. You rinse the pail until the water runs clear, comb the broom fibers, and wipe the scraper before returning every tool to its accustomed place. Your gloves hang near the radiator, their mended palms turned toward the fading warmth. The clock continues above the office, though its measured ticking no longer asks you to hurry. You walk the cleaned roads once more, noticing the pale shine of rails beneath resting trams and the dry paths between them. A drop falls from an underframe, then another, each sound traveling gently into the rafters. Outside, snow smooths the yard and softens the city beyond, while the great depot doors settle firmly into their frames against the winter night. Your coat is heavy upon your shoulders when you turn toward the staff door, and the day's warmth remains faintly in the broom handle behind you. There's nothing more the floor requires tonight, and nothing you need carry from it except the steady rhythm your hands already know. Behind you, the tools rest against the wall. The last lamp dims above the silent rails, and the snow keeps watch, while the old OSLO Tram Depot releases you into sleep.